Jeremy Hoy, man, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Alex?
Jeremy, I love people like you because your story is, it's not really linear. It has a lot of interesting points along the path. And I was saying to you before we walked in, the story of our parents where you work at one thing for 30 years and then you get your pension and, you know, ride off into the sunset. That's sort of different now, right? And you've done so many things that are not really that similar to each other. I love that because I think you can't accelerate learning, but you can have experiences where you pick up things very quickly. And I think your life is probably a perfect display of that. So Jeremy, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, and then we'll kind of go back to the beginning.
Sure. So I am currently the director of coaching for the Spot Athletics here in Columbus. We have 2 locations, and we train anyone from 8 to 80. In that role, you know, I'm overseeing and kind of holding a standard for all of our coaches. I'm hiring and training the coaches to hold that world-class standard that we have with all of our clients. You know, I guess more so in that role, I'm part of kind of helping develop and grow the brand. So that it's more about having a movement than a business. So we want to make a difference and impact and inspire as many people as we can around the world. We take fitness and kind of do it a little different. So that's kind of the big thing of where I am now. And you know, personally, I'm married with 4 kids, you know, and I think I told you earlier, I moved to a position now where we have some acreage, which was kind of always been the goal. And everywhere I've moved, kind of all over the country, over the world, is to get back to kind of having my feet on the earth a little bit and being able to have some of my own livestock and get my own eggs in the morning and maybe eventually get my own milk or something. But that's kind of been the goal. And based on what I knew growing up, you know, I feel like that created a really good foundation for me, and I wanted the same thing for my kids.
You're living like the Instagram dream. You got a farm, you got kids, you got a family, and you train, right?
Yeah.
But take me back to the beginning, because I know when you told me a little bit about your childhood, you never said that it was a bad childhood, but you did say that there were some circumstances that made it difficult. You know, a young mother, and you said it yourself. You grew up in a trailer, which most people don't dream of being a glamorous situation. You want to kind of tell me about the start of things and then how you got on this path that you're currently on.
Yeah. So you know, I have an older brother. You know, I think they call us Irish twins. We're 10 months apart. You know,
Irish twins. I
yeah,
never heard that.
Yeah, 10 months apart. That's what I think. And I think it didn't help that my mom dressed us like exactly the same growing up. So everybody just thought we were twins.
But you probably weren't in the same grade, right?
We were not in the same grade.
That'd have been convenient, right?
Yeah,
she's just shove you. But yeah, they're the same age. Don't worry.
We always dressed us up like little Amish kids. So you know, that was great. But we, you know, my mom got pregnant in high school. You know, and my dad did the right thing and took ownership of it and said, okay, I want to be dad, be a father, and put all his dreams and aspirations, college, all that stuff on hold. And then, you know, had me and my brother, and then you know, we grew up, like I said, the first couple of years in a trailer, and he just had to figure it out. So, you know, what do you do in my kind of small town, Lewistown, Pennsylvania, is you know, there weren't too many options for someone like that. So
Lewistown's like an industrial town, like a famous industrial town.
Yeah,
right?
well, we had I think the closest thing, one of the big there was some manufacturing there. Yeah, so we had like New Holland farm equipment.
Okay.
Ford New Holland farm equipment was made there. So that was a lot of people worked at that factory. And so my grandfather was there, and I think my uncle at the time would not have been there yet because he's younger. But they got helped get my dad in, and I think he started as an assembly guy, assembling stuff. But you know, he never. I guess growing up, we transitioned from there into kind of a single family home in a high traffic area. So it wasn't great, but the goal was always to get us to somewhere where you could raise our own food, right? And it's like
interesting.
You got 2 or 3 kids, and I grew up hunting and fishing a lot, so like that was that
does make a little more sense.
That was in our DNA and generations of deer and everything. So that you're putting food on the table, so it didn't matter as much about how much money you were making. You know, you got food, shelter, clothing. They were the big things, and so there was an opportunity when I was 9 or 10 to kind of buy into one of our family farms. You know, someone passed away, and we got it. So we moved on to the family farm, and even though that there wasn't, like, when I tell people that that my dad raised me and my two brothers, and we played sports, and we where we went without probably a lot of the material stuff, actually without the material stuff, and we didn't have like the televisions, we didn't have all that stuff, and but it forced us to use our minds and be outside and read and just learn and be studious about things. We didn't, he raised us on basically a $35,000 salary, which when you think about that now, you're just like, man, it's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
Like how did that even happen?
So mom wasn't working; she was at the home.
She was basically, she would be a teacher's aide a little bit, which is more of a part-time thing, but she contribute when she could. But she was basically shuttling us around, most of the time, and making sure we were staying out of trouble.
Oh, how times have changed, right?
Yeah, things are a little different. But my parents were awesome and never, like, we never felt like that we didn't have, except for obviously when you're with your peers, right? They got the new Jordans, they got the new this, the new that, and they're getting the attention from the girls. They're getting, I guess it depends on where you place value, right?
Right.
But my parents did an amazing job on not limiting us in any way, by just always encouraging us, like, hey, just this is where you are right now, but the sky's the limit. Like, whatever you want, you just got to go after it. And then my grandparents were kind of the same way. You can be and do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter what society says, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. You got to go after it. And I think that's where, I guess my mind always wandering and just listening. Like, this is, I'm older than you, but this still, I'm not old enough where there wasn't TV or but there weren't cell phones. There weren't cell phones when I was growing up.
You honestly probably were fortunate to miss that.
Yeah. I think about the things that I did even in college, and I'm like, I'm glad there weren't cell phones.
Yeah. So I was like the last generation in high school where we didn't really have smartphones. Like, I got my first smartphone when I was like a freshman or sophomore in college, which you just think about that like weird period in time where it's like you have phones, but you don't have smartphones yet. So all we could do was like text each other, which was even not great, but there was no social media on your phone. There was no Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, like Snapchat, TikTok. It just keeps on going, right?
Yeah.
And I'm with you. Like, there was none of that really. And then social media kind of was getting popular, like as I was like a sophomore, junior. But it's like you have 200 followers on Twitter. What you say like doesn't matter, no big deal. It's just your immediate friends. Now it's like a whole different world, right? So yeah, I think I'm lucky to have missed that, and you're probably better off because it sounds like you were running around on the farm, getting your hands dirty, just having fun as a kid,
doing fun stuff, man. Like, and our farm is basically we're in central Pennsylvania, so it's if you've ever been to Penn State or anywhere, like, there's the mountain ranges around there. So our farm is kind of at the base of a mountain.
Very cool.
So my brothers and I were always up exploring, doing things in the woods, and kind of getting lost and then trying to find our way back. So
that's like my dream. My dream house would be a lake, a clear lake that I could swim in, get in when it's cold, summer, go swimming when it's hot, and then a mountain next door. So you can like be like, okay, well, I'm going to go for a little hike. I'm going to go for a ruck, I'm going to jog up the mountain today, That would be like the dream. I don't know if that exists in Ohio, but it's, hey, you can dream.
Yeah, not a lot of mountains. Not
many of them.
I think, yeah.
The highest point in Ohio, I'm climbing the highest point with one of my friends in every state, and it's Campbell Hill, and it's like a parking lot. I think there's like a career technical institute or like an Army ROTC building like right there, and then you like walk out, you're like, we're here. It's not much to see. But so clearly athletics became pretty important for you because you said in the blurb you sent me, yeah, I was a college athlete, and then you kind of just moved on, and then we get to talking, and you said you were a 3-sport athlete in college. So like, how did that emerge? Because clearly that became an important part of your life.
Yeah, so athletics have always been. My dad was a coach of a lot of my sports teams growing up, and
was he an athlete? Because
he was an athlete. Yeah, and he said he didn't go to college. Just took responsibility for the family and the kids, which most people wouldn't do these days. So I commend him for that. And he was very athletic. My mom was a cheerleader. I always joke with her that cheerleading is not a sport, but she says it is. And I've trained cheerleading teams, so yes, I agree. It is like it is athletic. But it's your mom. You like to give her a hard time sometimes.
It's not a sport. Well, I mean, maybe I guess like
it's a competition.
It's a competition. This is like what I talk with my friends about, like golf. I'm like, well, is that a sport or is that a competition? I think it's difficult. I'm not saying I don't think it's difficult. I'm
Yeah.
not good at it. I'm not saying you're not like skilled at it, but I don't know if it's a sport per se. It's like darts. Is darts a sport? Like, I don't know.
Well, now they have everything, right? You can beer pong and or whatever. It's
cornhole. Yeah, cornhole. It's like, is that a sport? Yeah. It's like it's a competition.
It's competition.
Yes,
that's right.
Activity that's competitive.
Activity that's better. But yeah, sports have always been a big part of our family. And I was man, growing up, I was like the skinniest kid ever growing up, and so my uncle was more into powerlifting and kind of bodybuilding, and was pretty strong and jacked, and I knew that I needed to be doing something, and so and he lived probably 7-8 miles from us. And so I would, when I was 13 or 14, ride my bicycle.
There you go.
To his house, and he kind of introduced me to more formal weight training. And my dad at this time had, by the time I was 14, was welding and doing a lot of those. I learned to become a master welder within the company. And I'd be like, hey, I need a rack, a squat rack, and he'd be like, get old rebar, I use metal stuff. Whoa. And next thing I know, I got this squat rack. It looks like it came from the junkyard, but man, it would hold stuff.
Do you still have any of those? Those are like relics.
Yeah,
man.
I think he still has the bench press that he welded.
That's sweet.
And then he put like the board down, got some foam, and kind of built that out. And I think we had an old weight set from, man, like Sears and Roebuck or something. It was like the plastic shells with the concrete weights inside. I don't even know if you know what that is. Like those are pretty interesting. And then when the plastic cracks, you're pretty much done because everything falls out. But skinny bar. But I got introduced to that kind of stuff, and then I started noticing obviously a difference, and kind of obviously fell in love with the training aspect. But for me, I tell everybody, like, even though I'm in the profession for training, where it's all about training, I'm in the weight room inside, I felt like I got most of my training and being the strongest just by doing stuff on the farm, and then I joke about, how physical culture has kind of evolved to where now we're in offices, we're not doing things. And a lot of adult fitness, and some people, don't look at it as like, we're not going to sit down on machines. We want to do something more functional. And you look at it, and it's mimicking what hard work really is on a farm. It's like, we're going to do these tire. We're going to hit the sledgehammer on a tire. It's like, man, I can't do that. Like I tell my staff, like, I refuse to do stuff like that because it's not productive. Right. I would rather go dig a hole and put a post in it, or dig a ditch for somebody. Like, hey, if I want some physical labor, some manual labor, I'm going to go do manual labor. I'm not going to pretend I'm doing it in here on a tire. I'm actually going to do it. So like, that's the stuff I grew up with, and carrying logs and heavy rocks and bales of hay, and then I would challenge myself. I was always a very driven guy. So if I'm seeing my brother carrying 2 bales of hay, I'm trying to carry 4, or very competitive. And if I'm helping a local farmer out, and he's got 2 5-gallon jugs of milk he's carrying or doing something with water, I'm like, give me the damn barrel. Like, I'm carrying, it's a 1,000-pound barrel, give it to me. I'm like, you're only 120 pounds. I don't care, give it to me. I'm going to find a way to get it there. Like, I'm always pushing myself. And that's in me. So that's been my whole life, everything I'm doing. Like, I'm super competitive. I want to win. But I also, in the battle is often me versus me, right? So like, I want to be a better version of myself. And I think that's why sometimes you see me taking a lot of chances and doing different things in different areas. Because it's like, how can I grow the best? If I stay here in this position, or if I keep this business, does that help me get to where I want to be down here in this path? And it's like, I need to learn this skill set. Well, how do I learn it? I'm not going to go to school. I want to learn it I want to make mistakes, trial and error. And then I'm going to try it and get there. And so that's why my path is kind of crazy, but I feel like it does create a really cool story. I've got a lot of experiences, and my kids are like, Dad, you've done all these crazy things. And it's like, yeah, because I say yes to a lot of things. But I'm very selective in it. So it's like, I'm not going to say yes to anything, and I also know how to say no pretty well. But that's what drives me down that road. And so that was instilled in me. I was kind of born that way. I've always been super competitive, and I typically say, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that was one of the things that my grandfather always said. He was in the military, and he's like, he boxed and did all these things. Like, he's like, I knew a lot of people. And he goes, one thing about you is that when you say you're going to do something, if you tell me you're going to be an Olympic coach or do this or that, like, it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen, because I'm willing to sell out and work, pay the price make the sacrifice to get there. And that was kind of my athletic journey too, you know? So it's like, I think, have you been coached by your dad before?
No, it's funny actually. I love sports and athletics, but my parents were just not athletic. It's my dad's brother. I think my dad's family comes from like sort of no one ever had really like bad addictions, but just like that addictive trait kind of runs in the family.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad's brother was just addicted to like athletics. Like when he was in college, he got into bodybuilding, and the rumors were he like took steroids, and you never know. You're like, this is 50, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, is this true? And then like he got into karate and kung fu, and then he got into biking and he got into marathon running first, and just like ran like dozens of marathons, like hurt his knees, got into biking. And then for like the last like 30 years, he would do these like crazy 250, 300 mile bike races. And now we don't see him often. But the last time I saw him, he was telling me what he did that day. And he was like, I woke up and I did, an hour on the elliptical, and then I went for an hour walk, and then I came back and I did an hour on the bike, and then I did another hour and a half on the elliptical to end the day. I'm like, that's like 6 hours of cardio, man.
That's insane.
But he's just like obsessed with it. Yeah. And I'm like, well, there's worse addictions you could have than, doing cardio. But I don't think that happened for my dad. He just like was not into like athletics and like just being physical. It's just, I don't know. I've heard, and maybe you can tell me this. I think I heard it from Ben Greenfield, but he said that there's like a gene actually that expresses like how much you appreciate movement, or how much you like movement. And there's certain people who just are like, I love to move. Like I'm just moving all the time. You and me probably like kind of have that, right?
Yep.
But he said that he tested some of his kids, and like a couple of them didn't have like nearly as much. And he's like, that made so much sense, because like I would have to like kind of push them to get into like sports. And I think that I have that in spades, but I just don't know. Maybe my dad didn't, or maybe my mom, she was just like a regular gal that, she's almost 70 now. So there wasn't like that much athletics going on in the, 50s, 60s, 70s for women. But it was something that my family didn't really prioritize on their level. They kind of just let us choose, and I just chose all these different sports.
That's awesome. Well, and the reason I asked that was because, it's like when your dad coaches all your sports, and he comes home and he's still your dad.
Yeah.
There really isn't an off switch.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
I missed
maybe you dribble the basketball out
like,
the window.
I'm like 7 years old. Maybe I miss a tackle that, we lose. Heaven forbid we lose against another team of 7-year-olds, and it's like the end of the world for me. And I'm getting ridiculed at home, and it's like, I can't believe like the wrong angle. Your head wasn't up, whatever it was. Right.
Yeah.
Just for example. And, so that went on from the time I was in sports early at 5, like playing football against 7, 8-year-olds, and, getting my butt kicked and trying to figure things out. But I think I was 10 or 11, and I'm like, I need a break from my dad. Like I just need a different voice. I need something that and so
that's kind of that age where you're like, your parents used to be the coolest people in the world, but now you're like, they're not cool anymore.
Yeah, it was like, man, is my dad a dick or just a dick to me, right? Like, it's like one of those things, and it's like, obviously he loved me, but it's like, it was just more me. It wasn't even about him at that time. It was like, I need to try something different, and I had always done. It was baseball. I was an all-star in baseball, so I didn't even I loved baseball. And then, I played football, and then winter sports were basically either, I played a little basketball, but it wasn't my thing. I was like, I'm going to get ready for baseball in the spring or whatever. And then,
were you tall when you were young? 'Cause you're tall now.
I was the same height as my older brother for a while. And that was the thing. He used to try to fight me, and then there was a certain point where I'm just like, hey, I'm your big brother now. You just need to chill a little bit. Like this is, you can chase me around with a pitchfork all you want. This isn't working. Like it's not gonna hurt me. I'm bulletproof. But then I got as you get tall, and then I got skinnier, right? So it's like I'm one of those kind of guys where I'm running, my knees are buckling, like touching each other almost, right? Yeah. It's like, man, is this really me? But I think there were some of my football teammates or kids that I grew up with that were getting into wrestling, and they've been wrestling a little bit, and like, you got to come try this. And I'm just like, I go, and I'm like, man, I really suck at this. Like, this is terrible. Like, yeah, I love having my face is planted and rubbed across a mat, and this is, but I'm like, but I'm like, am I willing to put up with this?
Right.
My dad isn't the one on me about it, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, what's my trade-off here? And so then, I wrestled and I got better, and then it came to my freshman year of high school, and I had 2 wins because I was, that's when I met my wife, so we've been,
really?
in like 3 weeks, I've been married 23 years.
Jeez.
And
Congrats.
so she was, yeah, thank you. She was a grade above me. And, I was probably 5'11" and a half, and I was wrestling 119 pounds.
Yeah. So you're very lean.
Very, just skin and bone, man. Like, I don't know how I was moving, really. It's like a skeleton with a couple of things on it, right? But I was trying to, it was a weird situation my freshman year, because my body was trying to grow.
Yeah.
But I was literally holding it back through wrestling, and I was dieting back then was the wrestlers back then, like, hey, take these water pills, this will help you lean out, and like, but don't eat for a week. I'm like, what the hell, like, not eat, and then I wonder why after 30 seconds of wrestling match I feel like shit. It's like, what happened? So after that, but I loved football, because even though I was skinny, I was a big hitter. I was, because as you might, I don't know if you were an angry teenager or what kind of teenager you were, but like I started taking a lot of this. I understood more now about not having certain things, and I let it build up, or the aggressions of, hey, my friends are all going here, and you can't. You got to go around and fix the fence row, or you got to do something in the morning. You got to go to the neighbor and help him milk his cows at 4:30 in the morning. So you can't go to this event with all your friends, or you can't do all this stuff, and that would just start to piss me off. And so I told, and then I would work out and then get muscle. And so like my testosterone was probably stupid high. Mm-hmm. And so
not to mention you're doing all that additional work.
All the additional work. And so like
getting your hands dirty,
absolutely
moving heavy stuff.
So I loved the physical nature. I loved the I don't want to use the words violence, but of football. Like, I loved football. And then, wrestling kind of gave me that as well. So I was always like this skinnier guy, but I was deceivingly strong. So, because I'm not in the weight room trying to build huge muscle, which I was doing some, but it was like, I'm trying to build strength. But then I could go grab a couple 100-pound log and throw it on my shoulder and take it for a walk, where I had teammates that were, squatting 400 pounds, sophomores in high school, who couldn't even pick that log and put it on their shoulder. So it was, you want to talk about functional strength, right? You want to talk about, if that's the word you want to use, but it made a big difference. Being able to still do that on the mat. So my freshman year, I win 2 matches. I just miss. You had to win 3 to get a varsity letter. And that was like one of my things. And I'm just like, man, am I just that shitty of a wrestler? Like, because I had a good 8th grade year, which doesn't matter. Does it really? And then I remember at the end of that year, towards the end of that year, everyone, the high school team's going to states. We have wrestlers going to state championship in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania wrestling is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And Ohio is a pretty big deal too. Probably two of the best wrestling states in the country. And I went and I was watching the state tournament, and I had, so as much as my dad and I might have had like a kind of a pissed off relationship, it was still good. Like, it wasn't the worst relationship, but I let some of the stuff he was saying about my sports, and then of course, as him being a coach, he's trying to coach me on wrestling, which he'd never wrestled. So I'm just it's just pissing me off more, right? But it's like, I don't want to be this disrespectful kid and speaking up against him. So it's like, I'm having these talks with my mom. So my mom and I were really close, because she was that outlet for me to kind of just vent and talk about some of that stuff. So I go to this state tournament, and I'm watching. So I'm paying for a ticket. I'm a spectator, or whatever. And I'm watching these kids that are winning the state tournament, and this is in it's like Hershey Park Arena, so it's a huge arena, and these kids that win are sprinting up and running up the bleachers, and they're finding their mom, and they're giving her a hug, and I'm just like, man, I want to do that someday. Like, I'm like, and I remember looking at my mom, and like, I'm gonna place at states.
Isn't it funny how like little instances like that stick in your head?
Little things, man. Like, I can still see it. I can still see that. I can feel the environment in Hershey Park Arena for Pennsylvania State Championships. Like, it's incredible. And And I'm like, and I think I told my mom, my dad, and like one of my elementary school coaches was there, and like, I'm going to wrestle here. Like, I'm coming. And this is after a 2-win season. And they're just like, okay. Like, do you know what's ahead of you? I'm like, I do. I'm going to do it. And then I proceeded to just continue to, like, I work, man. Like, that's instilled in me too as part of the competitiveness. Like, hey, this is what it takes. I got, whatever it takes. So while people were getting access to weight rooms and doing all these things they need to do, I'm with my dad. We're cutting wood, and I'm like, leave it all there. Cut the biggest wood you can. Leave it all out here. I'm going to split it. And then I would go out, and I'd be like, it'd be 5:30 in the morning. It'd be dark out. Like, I'd turn the garage light on just to have enough light on this huge stack of wood that my brother and I would have brought over from across the road in the woods, that my dad cut. And I'm like stacking them all up. I'm like, I'm going to spend this next hour. I'm just going to be angry, and I'm going to split this wood, and then I'm going to carry it. I'm going to stack it, and then I'm going to find some more. And then I was like going and asking other farmers, hey, do you have any big stones in your property that you need taken out where you're doing your hay, or you're plowing your field? And they're just like, yeah. Hey, yeah, I'll give you like $10 per rock or $5 per rock. Come. And I'm going in like 20 acres deep, and they're like, and I have nothing. Like, I don't have a wheelbarrow and this kind of stuff. Like, I want these rocks piled up over here, bringing it back. So like, I'm carrying some huge ass rocks that are shaped real funny and all these weird things. And, that's obviously just a strength component. But my dad's like, hey, there are different opportunities to get in some wrestling groups. And, our YMCA had a wrestling group. And so he's getting me in touch with different coaches and then at one point we built out, it might've been after my sophomore year, we built out we had a huge barn, and obviously the barn is a big deal for a farmer. So like we had a huge barn, 2 stories, and we took half of this, like a third of this barn was big enough to put down wrestling mats. Like, it was a huge barn. And so we put down, we got my dad somehow, again, this is on not much money, figured out a way. He's like, hey, if you're committed, let's do this. And he's like, I can't take you to these, we're 40 minutes from State College, from Penn State. Mm-hmm. He's like, I can't get you to Penn State to these wrestling events, or, and so there's like all these different big wrestling schools around us that are 35, 40 minutes away. And he's like, but if I get a wrestling mat, if I find a used mat somewhere and we get it here, we'll host it here in the barn this summer. And so it's like 110 degrees in that barn. Oh yeah. And man, we had some of the best wrestlers in Central Pennsylvania coming in. Cool. And yeah, I remember him. He put up like, because obviously he's a basketball player, my dad. So he put up basketball hoops, and we would warm up. So, but I don't know if you ever saw a lot. Like, I consider myself pretty athletic, and growing up with my dad, like, I could shoot, I could dribble, I could do those. I couldn't dribble the best compared to other people, but most wrestlers are terrible. Yeah, they're terrible at basketball. So I was like Michael Jordan of the room, man. Like, this guy is like, yeah, this guy right here. And then, but it was full contact basketball.
Oh, I see. Wrestlers, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be. Like, that's why we can't
Nobody's calling fouls.
We can't play basketball because it gets out of control. But I mean, you want to talk, it was like the most bricks ever. It was terrible. But nobody even cared, because it was more about like, hey, I'm going to throw it up and I'm going to take this guy and just throw him through a barn, right? But we did. But the funny part is it did get pretty physical, to the point where we were putting guys through like the side of the barn. Like, barn boards were breaking, and my dad's finally like, all right, we got to chill on this a little bit.
Probably some parents are like coming and like, what happened here? Like, I thought they were just going to wrestle a little bit.
Yeah, but that was a big help, big asset for all of us. Like, I'm wrestling kids bigger than me. So
did your brother wrestle?
My older brother did wrestle.
Did you guys, practice with each other?
We did. It always ended up in a fight somehow.
Makes sense.
I mean, yeah. And then that was the thing. We had other brothers coming, and it was just like, you can't wrestle each other. You can't wrestle each other. But at this point, I was getting a lot bigger than my brother. I think he graduated wrestling like 135, and he was 5'11", maybe 5'10", and then I graduated. I think I graduated wrestling. I wrestled 171, but I wrestled some 189 matches. I kept growing all the way into college, but that wrestling in that barn and then doing some other stuff in the summer helped me to the point where I won the region, and I went up. This is before Hershey, so I won the region, which was a really tough region, and I went up and I hugged my mom. So it was a big moment for us. And then I went to states, and I finished in the top 8 in Pennsylvania. So I wrestled in Hershey Park Arena.
There you go, man.
Like, I said I was going to do it, and I did it. So
that's amazing, man. By the way, I love that hero montage of you chopping wood and like deep into the woods, grabbing stones and hauling them out. Baffled farmers are like, "You want to pick up stones?
Yeah.
Sure, you can. Yeah, you can take them."
Well, that's exactly it. So there was a neighbor that was up closer to the other side of the foot of the mountain, and I mean, I feel like he's always been 100 years old for as long as I can remember, And then I remember walking up because we had to go do something. My mom was like, "Hey, let's go. I got to go up and talk to him about something. That, you want to come along?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to ask him if I can go dig some holes or do something stupid, I just want to get stronger. I need to my grip to get better and, stop being so soft with my grip." And it's like, in the meantime, I could hold on to anything for any amount of time. And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And I start asking him, he looks at me, he starts like, he's puts his glasses down, he's like looking at me, smiling, and laughing. He's like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
He's like,
it's like, this kid has some anger issues. He needs to take out on a boulder.
Are you okay? He's like, "Yeah, I got all kinds of." He's like, and there was like a pile of scrap metal and stuff. He's like, "Hey, take this and move this," and just like, "Love it, man. Let's go." And he's like,
it's probably the best deal this farmer ever made. This kid's just gonna do all this work for me. I'll pay you $5. Sure.
I think it was like, I'll pay it. My wife will pay you with meatballs or cookies or something like that. Let's go. I can't eat meatballs or cookies. What do you got? Lettuce? Great. I'll take some of that.
I'm sure this guy Cam Haynes. He has this like boulder apparently that he carries up this mountain like every day. I don't know how heavy it is, 20, 30, 50 pounds. And he has the word poser written on it, I think. He's like, everybody says that I'm a poser online. He's like, just carrying that up the mountain. Just a maniac, man. Wow. So you do end up going to college, and wrestling's a part of it. Football becomes a part of it. And then throwing and track and field becomes a part of it.
Yep. Yeah. And that was and I did enjoy. So I switched from baseball. I was an all-star baseball player in Pennsylvania for up until I was 13. I get to high school, and the coach was a bit of a douche. And
Seems like that I've heard that story from many a baseball player.
Happens.
I mean, I'm sure it's all coaches, but it just feels like baseball lends itself to like
and it's unfortunate because we had our county has won some state titles, and we had a lot of success, a lot of really good baseball players, and I was a pitcher. I loved to pitch. I was consistent. And I get there, and I think the coach, I can't remember if the coach had just changed, and it was like, we're going to hire this guy who was one of the assistant football coaches, and I didn't like him really that much either. But then, I come home, and I think my mom and dad both knew him, and my dad's like, he's a douche, basically. And my mom was like, yeah, he says things that are kind of inappropriate. And so I let the coach know that I'm this skinny 14-year-old kid, and it's like, hey, this ain't gonna fly. Like, I hear my kind of like the Will Smith slap. Like, you get my mom's name out of your mouth, kind of thing. Yeah. If I hear you say my mom's name, basically, I'm gonna kill you, kind of thing. But that's a whole other story. Yeah. That's a different podcast. That's a different podcast.
That sounds like a hell of a story right there. 14-year-old you going up against a grown baseball coach.
But it just wasn't. It was my time to move on to something else. And I loved the track coach, especially the throwing coach. Was this guy who was a former Division I football player, Division I wrestler, and he's got this huge barrel chest and just
like
gray hair. Yeah, he's a tall guy, and he's just like, look, we need some throwers. He's like, all right, well, what is that? Like, tell me. Like, it's like, I know you played baseball. He's like,
like it's applicable to throwing a discus.
Yeah. He's like, okay. He's like, and I tell you what, you come out for track, you don't even have to practice. You just lift. It's like, wait, what? Run this by me again? He's like, practice these, because they didn't hardly have too many throwing coaches. And I'm just like, all right. He's like, yeah. And he's like, I'm going to make sure you lift. So like, he would literally go and lock the weight room beside the track and be like, making sure I was in there lifting and help me out doing some things. And he's like, okay, now go throw a couple times. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, just go throw it.
Throw it as hard as you can.
Pick it up and throw it. Yeah. But no, they actually taught me some technique, and I ended up doing really well. And he was just an awesome dude, awesome coach, just a fun guy to be around. So like, I always say, I was just having a conversation with my coaches yesterday about it, that I was at a conference last week in Orlando, and there was a speaker there, McCall Jones was talking about different charisma styles and how often we try to emulate or be like somebody else. And it doesn't always look authentic because that's not who we are. Right.
Yeah.
And it turned into a conversation of like, look, take with the other coaches I was working with yesterday, they're just like, look, I've had so many bad coaches. I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. We all have. We've had terrible coaches. We've had great coaches. We had everything in between. But you've got to take little pieces, and then what worked, what didn't work, knowing that that's what worked for you, because you're those. You are being you're representing other athletes that have similar or influenced by similar styles, right? So, what if that's what you kind of coach you want to be, and that's authentic to you, then be that coach. If not, don't try to be another coach. Be like, hey, this coach was the best coach I ever had. I'm going to be like him. Yes. Like, man, if that coach was a yeller and screamer and it resonated with you, and that's not who you are in your DNA and your personality, you look terrible. It looks so fake, and you look like a fraud.
Yeah.
And believe me, these kids, 9, 10, even at 9 and 10-year-old, they're going to be like, man, coach, this doesn't seem right coming out of his mouth. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. His energy feels fake, right? And the parents see that. So it's like, always just be kind of authentic. And understanding your charisma style, and that was the way she presented that was pretty cool. I learned a lot on that.
I love that, the charisma style. I've never heard that, but it makes total sense. You and me have probably both met these people that they're just like so gregarious, and they're just like, oh, Alex, dude, and you're like, well, I'm this person's best friend, But in my mind, I'm like, I want to be more like that person, but I know that's not really like who I am. Like, I just don't have that thing. Can you like lean into that? Yes, certainly. But that's interesting. The charisma style that's right for you. And yeah, I think I'm a little more reserved and understated, and I try to be helpful for people, but I have that exact experience with a coach. I had this coach who was kind of a dick, but he was really funny, and he was like fun. And you just kind of realize, like, this is literally who this person is. Hills on the touchline, Mr. Johnson. And you're just like, what is this? And then he had an assistant coach, and his assistant ended up taking over for him like 2 or 3 years later after he had coached our team. And he just tried to be him. He like tried to emulate the coach, but it didn't come off with that like same, like, oh, this is who he is. He was just mean. Yeah. And you're like, I ended up quitting that team. I was like, I don't need to play on this team. And that's what it was. He just tried to emulate the coach prior, and everyone was like, that's not you. Yep. Like, we know that's not you.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. So like, and the point of that was like, this coach had some really cool characteristics and qualities, and was just completely genuine. You can tell like he cared, and he could have been, he's gigantic man, like could have been the biggest hard ass ever. But you're like, man, this guy is the most passionate guy about coaching and about truly helping people. But like when he spoke, like it was like freaking thunder coming out. Like he had a booming voice, and you're just like, you listen, like he just commanded respect in a way that, and that honestly, that's kind of how I coach. Like I never, when I had coaches that yelled and screamed, I literally wanted to fight them. And it's like, dude, I get this shit at home. I don't need this here. Like, we're gonna go. We're literally gonna fight, and you're making me shut down. So it creates a stress response in my system that is immediate fight or flight. Right? I'm sympathetic, not parasympathetic at that point, and that's not how you're gonna. And then I'm looking around, and some of my teammates are the same way. And that was something coming from. I know I'm jumping around a lot, but
no, you're fine.
Coming from football, wrestling, very aggressive, very intense. And then, when I was a DSOC working with all these Olympic athletes, and then I came,
what was it? I'm sorry.
USOC is the United
Olympic
States,
Committee, right?
Olympic Training Center. Yeah. The OTC. And then, I went to Pittsburgh, and hockey was like the teams I was working with. And I'm watching these kids, because hockey is such a skill sport, and you look at it, you're like, man, these guys are really intense. They can fight like that on drop of a dime, basically drop of a glove, right? They can fight anytime. But man, you want to bring that kind of same energy you had with football and that intensity, and these kids will all shut down. Like it's not what they need. They don't respond to that, and they literally want to fight you. Yeah. And so like you have to learn, like every sport is a little different. So you got to learn and adapt some of your coaching style. So I tell the coach that you need to be authentic to who you are, but you just adapt it a little bit to the personalities and characteristics of that team. So like if you're a bulldog type coach and you're with hockey, you better tone it down a little bit, or you're not going to get the same response, or you're only going to resonate with the guys that are just dipsticks, that are just fighters that can't skate. And they're your third and fourth line guys often, right? And I'm not saying they can't skate, but they're just not as good as your top line guys, your skill guys. And so you want to resonate with them. It takes a little different approach. And so that was always, and I love that challenge with different teams that I work with. Like teams are my favorite thing. I don't like doing a lot of individual or even like small group. I love working with teams because it's like I have so many personalities and I got to get everybody going. Like I might have said before, it's like, and everybody uses an analogy of like, hey, we got to make sure we have the bus, and then we got to get the right people on the bus, and then we got to get the bus moving in the right direction. Then you got to be in the right seat. Who's driving it? So all these different analogies within that. I love that stuff. Like that's what I'm super passionate about, and giving the kid the tools to develop. It's like, all right, I got the right players, I got the right people on the bus, I got the right bus, but we plugged in the wrong directions on the GPS, or I put the wrong destination in. Maybe did we think too small and not big enough? Like, hey guys, we're gonna win the Big Ten. Like, is that our focus? Like, no, we want to win the national championship. So like, well, our bus stopped at the Big Ten, and then we sucked after that. So we didn't, there's a reason. Like, we sold ourselves short. We thought too small on this. Like, we need to think bigger to the point where it's a little scary. Mm-hmm. And then knowing the team that we have, it's like, hey, it's our job to get them there.
Yeah, and I love that, to bring it to the business world, which I'm sure we'll get into your business experiences here. But it's so hard to bring the team together in a business setting, and people don't think of a team of business people like they think of a sports team, but it's so similar. You have a group of people, everybody has a role. Not everybody's going to be the star, but everybody is important. You have some sort of a coach, a leader. That person has to earn the respect of the other people. You guys are moving towards a common goal. You have to have core values. You have to have a mission. You have to have a vision of what this thing looks like. And so many people I talk to, especially at organizations that aren't working, I'm like, well, what are the core values of that organization? They're like, well, we don't even know. We don't have a thing. Well, what's the culture like? Well, we haven't built a culture. I'm like, no, you've built a culture. It's just not a guided one. Yeah. And it's just like a team, right? You can build a culture with a team. Maybe it's a hardworking team. Maybe it's not a hardworking team. That's your culture. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you, as a coach, said, hey, we're a hardworking team. We're a hardworking team. We're a hardworking team. The Columbus Crew, I'm a fan. They used to have this motto, the hardest working team in America, which I loved. Yeah. I was like, that's such a great thing to strive for. But they don't talk about that anymore. I think it's basically gone away. And I don't know why or where, but that isn't part of the ethos of the team anymore. And you see football teams like the Baltimore Ravens or a defensive team, right? I think that's such an important thing to do and build out as teams. And you talk about like that intensity when someone communicated with you, how you would get defensive. Man, I would say the first thing that I see when people are not talking to each other in a manner that's beneficial in a business is someone instantly puts someone on the defensive. Hey, why'd you do this? And then the other person is like, now I'm defending myself. And a lot of people don't have the skills to either de-escalate or just accept, like, I understand that this person is asking me a question. They're not trying to attack what I have done. They're not attacking me as a person. They're just attacking like the result that we had. So I see so many people that they'll like just escalate it and attack back and be like, well, I'm doing it this way because you told me this. And you're just like, okay, like in 5 seconds, we've just started an argument, Yep. And when there's a coach and a player, sometimes there's just that hierarchy where you're like, the coach is telling me to do it. I might be pissed off. I might not think this is right, but I'm just going to do it. Clearly you didn't always have that in you, which wasn't, wrong or anything. It was just kind of how you were. But when you got two employees that are either close to the same level or at the same level, it's just like escalate this thing. So I tell people, I'm like, hey, you can't put someone on the defensive right away, because then their just normal reaction is going to be like, I'm being attacked. I need to attack back. So like, instead of like, why'd you do this? Be like, hey, we saw that this was the result. Let's talk about like what happened that led to this. You're like, cool. Like, we're collaborating right now. Yep. I just tell people so often, I'm like, you got to think collaborate. Even if something did go wrong, as soon as you accuse someone that, hey, you screwed this thing up, they're like defending themselves, and they may not have any leg to stand on to defend themselves. Yep. But that's okay if you can bring it up in a helpful way, as opposed to just putting them in a position where they're like, I'm fighting for my job right now. I'm literally fighting for my position at this company. And that's like 101 in terms of management and communication that people don't seem to have. And it's a hard thing to teach people how to communicate in a healthy way, because they're like, I know how to communicate. Don't worry about me. It's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think communication is man, it's like an undervalued and underappreciated skill that I think was John Maxwell was like, everyone communicates, but few connect, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and connection is even how we take it, right? So, you come at me, I got pretty thick skin, so it's like, I'm not going to take it personal. So I'm like, all right, then I'm trying to think like, well, what's he really talking about? And I'm mature enough and have enough experience communicating. I'm like, Alex, what are you really trying to say? Mm-hmm. Just, you're making personal attacks. What are you really trying to say? And have that conversation. But communication is something that I think that a lot of companies should invest a little more in, and do like role playing situations. Like, hey, what is, someone, how do you communicate? How do you, in this situation, this guy, his numbers came in low. You're in charge of him. How do you handle this? How do you deal with this? And it's like, well, some of that is the we, not I, right? So if I come at you and put you in that situation where now it is you versus me, and what should I expect out of that? Like, anybody that's worth anything is like going to be defensive about it, right? Because you're working at it, you're putting in the time and effort. It's like, hey, man, I've seen you working at this for the last 3 months, and your numbers are low. Like, what? This is ridiculous. I can't have this anymore. Like, this is whatever. And it's like, hey, man, I've seen all the hard work you've been putting in. Thank you. I know it's incredible. We're looking at the numbers. Can you just verify that this is what they are? And it starts a whole other conversation, takes you down a different road. And it's like, now we are looking at it together. And because I know you're invested in this company, and by the amount of time you put in, you've been working these long days, long hours. And so it creates a weight. It frames it differently. And I think that's part of the problem with communication, is how we frame that with our coworkers, with even somebody above us. Like, I want to go ask you a question, and maybe I work for you, or you're one of my corporate sponsors, and you're throwing us a lot of money. So it's like, how do I communicate with you effectively? It's like, well, I gotta do it in a way that is not going to be like, what about this? What about that? It's like, I have to ask the question correctly, so that it's a we situation and not a me situation.
Yeah, I've heard Warren Buffett say, you praise specifically and criticize generally.
Absolutely.
I love that. And we have so many vendors that are, generally successful business owners, and they'll just fire off these like kind of, I don't want to say nasty emails, but these emails that just instantly turn me and my team off. I said this in one of the recent podcasts. I was a referee. I refereed soccer like through the summers. That was like my summer gig while I was in college. I played soccer in college, and I reffed. And then I reffed a little bit after. And up until I was an official myself, I would just yell at the ref and like, just, oh, I can't believe that. You open your eyes, And then I started refereeing, and I was like, oh, I don't help those people on the field. Like, it's not like you're being intentionally impartial, but if somebody's like just a dick to you on the field, like, you don't go out of your way to help them, especially every once in a while you go like, okay, I need to call it, because I don't want this guy to continue to yell at me.
Yep.
But you do not help those people. You shut down from those people. At least I did. So, when our vendors, like, they fire off these like emails, I'm just like, hey, like, we're not perfect. That's totally fine. It's acceptable. But if you talk to us in a constructive way, like a collaborative way, it's like you said, like, hey, let's work on this problem together.
Yep.
Not like, hey, you stink, you need to work on this problem. It's like, hey, like, we're a partner. That's how we view our relationship with our clients. We're partners, right? Like, we don't own your brand, but we're trying to push your brand forward just like you are. So let's collaborate. Let's move this thing forward. And, I just had this kind of a eureka moment over this last week. I was just walking into the office and talking about a vendor that was kind of being difficult with us. And I said, hey, we just want to do happy, healthy business. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good,
Right.
Because you want to be in business to be successful. Well, why do you want to be successful? So that like you have money. Well, why do you want money? So that you don't have to stress about things, and then you can like buy the things that make you happy. If you do, whatever, like you like having a nice table, that makes you happy. You like, having a nice bottle of wine, that makes you happy. Well, you need the money to have those things. So why not just skip forward to the end and just like do business that makes you happy and healthy? You don't have to worry about that kind of like stressful part. Like, I would much rather have a small business and be really happy than have like a huge business and like hate it, because it's like, well, what's the reason for this thing? You talked about like, kind of your upbringing on a farm. I think I saw a stat that like some of the happiest workers in America are construction workers and farmers. And it's like, those sound like really hard, like physically grueling jobs, right?
Yeah.
some of like the first ones you think about when you talk about like a grueling job, but they're some of the happiest people. And I think that's because they just have like a purpose. They have a reason. It's like, hey, I can see things through to completion. I get to move. I get to activate my brain. I get to put every part of myself into this thing. And then I see a cow grow up, or I see a building be constructed, or I see crops built. And, you know, I get to harvest those for people. And, yeah, you know, we just want to do business with people who are making it a happy, healthy environment for us. And those people that aren't, you just don't give them great service. You know, it's impossible to say, I'm going to give you excellent service, even though you're being a dick to me. It's just, you can't do it. You know, you can try.
It's hard.
You can lie to yourself and be like, I'm still giving them the level of service, but you're going to bend over backwards for those people who are like good to you. And that's what we do business.
It's a loyalty, right? It's kind of like, you get the service you deserve. Right? Like
I like that.
I'm gonna give you what you deserve. So
I like that.
You wanna, and going even further back to some of the stuff you were saying, it's like it comes down to ownership, right? People not wanting to take ownership for where they are. So maybe you didn't hit those numbers because I didn't give you the resources you needed. You know, and it's like, so that ultimately it should fall on me, but I'm not willing to take ownership of that. It's your fault. It's your fault. So then I'm going to come at you in a way that's going to put you defensively instead of taking ownership. And it's like, no, it's if more people took ownership along the way, it would end up a lot different. And that I mean, obviously there's a lot of other communication pieces there too, but I think that's a big one, is the ownership piece.
Jeremy, I want to take a quick break, man, but we got bobsledding to get to.
We got a lot of
Stuntman
stuff
to get to.
We got a lot of stuff.
We haven't even gotten to your restaurants
The
yet.
business, no.
You haven't even gotten to the coaching side of things. So we'll hurry back and do this thing.
All right, cool. Thanks.
All right, Jeremy. So 3-sport athlete, and you know, it sounded like you had quite a bit of athletic success at your time. Then you're out, and what is your next step in the progression? What's your mind thinking at that point in time?
So my mind was thinking that I'll go back to where you want to start after college, or you want to start?
Yeah, either or.
Because I'll start, you know, when I was in high school, I think I said earlier, I was kind of a late bloomer, you know, that I grew all the way into college. And so I started having a lot more interest in me as an athlete my senior year. Yeah. And I had some teammates, high school football teammates, and some wrestling teammates that had an interest before that. And so like I would even go on trips with them. But my senior year, I'm going to some mid-major D1 programs, you know, wanted me to come in for football, and they're like, hey, we'll redshirt you, you know, and then you get an opportunity to keep growing, and we'll have you probably having an impact role your sophomore year. And I'm like, I want to go somewhere I can play right away. Like I just, it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter to me at that time. And I'm like, I love football. I just want to be on the field hitting people. Like it didn't really matter to me. And so I was, you know, again, neither one of my parents went to college. My older brother was the first one to go to college, and he went to Juniata College, which was like 35 minutes from our house, small D3 program. He wrestled there. And, so the whole college, like I kept waiting, thinking like, this is how it works. Like, you know, and then next thing you know, all the applications had to be in, and Susquehanna was not Juniata, because I didn't want to go where my brother went, you know, even though I could have. And so I decided to last minute, like I already missed all the deadlines for everything else. And like, well, looks like I'm going to Susquehanna. Yeah. And I went there for 2 years and continued, you know, playing football, and I did not wrestle there because they cut the program. But you know, I don't want to take anything away from D3 wrestling, but when I was in high school, my senior year, I would go up and I'd wrestle with some of my brother's team at Juniata, and they had some, you know, they had a guy heavier than me. I think he was 180, 184, 190, whatever he was. And I think he was ranked in the nation, and I used to beat him at D3 when I was in high school. And so I'm like, well, if I do want to wrestle after Susquehanna, I don't want to waste eligibility. So, you know, I'll just play football and do track when I was at Susquehanna, and trade and do a little bit of partying too. Obviously, you gotta maybe, because again, most people, it's their first taste of freedom. I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to milk anything. I'm not doing anything farming. And it's like, well, wait, I can stay out. I can do this. But you know, as most people do, you have a little bit of fun. You know, but I did not mention this, but I also academically was very good. I was a very smart kid. You know, I graduated top 5 in my class in high school, and so academically, I was able to get into some programs. That's why they kind of got me into Susquehanna, you know, athletically, academically, and So college even came pretty easy to me, just because, I created really good study habits. As you know, with anything, right? It's all about the habits. What habits do you have and what works for you? So the way that I study and learn may not be the same for my kids. So I try to teach them different ways of doing things. I'm like, hey, this is how I have to study. I'm not the guy that can study with the TV on in the background. And like, I need silence, where I know people that they're fine with all the noise. So like, I found what worked for me. It worked. I found my style. And so go to college 2 years, and I realized I was in an athletic training major, because I'm like, I didn't want to do anything else. It was more of they have business programs, all this stuff. And again, I think I said in an email I sent, like, I knew nothing about business.
You said you never took a business class.
Never took a business class. And I can even get into a little bit of the mindset about money, because like, if you grow up without money, you don't really think about it that much, and you just like, hey, I accept what I have. But it might have been the cause of some of my anger too, because like, I see what everybody else has, right? It's like, well, I want to move off the farm. I couldn't wait to get away from the farm. I loved at the time, I probably hated every moment of it, but it's like, but looking back as I got older, it's like, man, the things that it developed for me and instilled in me, it's like, I want that. And that's why I wanted that for my kids. I want other kids to have that. Like, I'd like to have a farm camp, but who would sign up for manual? Actually, more people. Maybe be surprised. Maybe like, hey, I'm having a farm camp. We're gonna run your kids through some manual labor. Well, sign me up. Yeah,
that sounds exactly like the farmer who you were moving trash for.
I know.
Like, this is a hack. They're doing the work for me.
He's got it all figured out, right? But so the no business classes. The mindset about money was more of, like I said, the psychology of money. I know there's some books on that, but it's like, I think I've even heard my mom and dad like, hey, that money is the root of all evil, right? But that's really not what it says in the Bible.
That's right.
It's the love of money, right? So it's way different, and that's greed. There's a lot of things involved in that. So it's like, it's having how do you have a healthy relationship with money, right? By first understanding what it is, how it works, part of the barter, fiat, like all those different things, right? And so now it's, again, I kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but I wasn't thinking about money at all. First 2 years of college, I'm thinking about sports, and I'm athletic training, because they didn't have exercise science and anything like that. And I learned when I was there, it was a kind of build your own major. So they're haphazardly putting this program together while I'm there. And I remember it was like after my freshman year, there was another female athlete there in the athletic training program. She had just graduated, and she was trying to take her boards for becoming certified as an ATC, so an athletic trainer, right? And you had to have so many hours, so many of this, which we did. So we were, part of the program is you're helping as a student assistant, you're helping tape ankles, do all these other things, right? And she's like, if you want to stay in this program, you got to go somewhere else. She's like, they did not count my hours for the exam. And I'm just like, wait a minute, what?
Whoa.
And so it had me thinking a little more. And then I started looking at other programs. I knew some people from my hometown. Speaking of referees, there was a wrestling referee that I knew his family very well. His family and my family knew each other. And their son, who was, I think, 5 years older than me, had just gone through the physical therapy program at Slippery Rock University. And so he talked highly of it. And it was like, look, if you want to go for exercise science, you want to go for anything that is not athletic training, or if you want to go for athletic training, you got to go here. This is where you got to go. Like, is one of the, at the time, was like number 1, 2, or 3 in the country for that program. And so I started looking at it. And then after my sophomore year, I transferred to Slippery Rock. I remember I had a really good sophomore, a much better sophomore season for football. We got to play. Our team got invited to go play in Germany. Again, stories just come out of anywhere, right? Yeah. So we got invited, and we played. We were a guest. I don't know if you remember back when they had World League, the World League football. This might have been before your time.
Not really.
So it was part of the NFL, and there was a Frankfurt Galaxy team. Now you have to look this up. It's like NFL Europe, World League.
I remember like NFL Europe vaguely.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think they called it like World League at the time, but these were basically people that they might have drafted, and they were trying to grow the sport internationally. So instead of having a game in Ireland or somewhere else, it's like, we're actually gonna have teams there. And we played out of it. So we were their guests, and we were playing like a team of some kind of other, like they had semi-pro football over there. So these are all guys that, for whatever reason, are over in Germany. Some are military bases, whatever. So some of these guys had gone to like LSU. Like, there were some really good players, and we get invited over. And I remember, I'm just like, this is gonna be a really serious game. We're probably gonna get our asses kicked, right? These are all former D1 players. But we had a really good team. And I'm like, all right, well, yeah, let's go over and see what it's all about.
So is this an NFL Europe team that you're playing against, basically?
It is not. So we were their guests. So like we stayed at where they stayed in the hotel, because those guys all lived out of like this 13th floor of this Holiday Inn. So we stayed on like the 9th and 10th floor, but we were assigned to certain players to show us around, basically for an accountability to make sure we weren't doing stupid stuff in Germany, which is really easy to do.
Yeah.
But they were bad influences anyway, so it didn't matter.
Right.
Again, that's another episode.
It's like your recruiting trip.
Man.
What do they do to get this kid to come here?
No, we went to the red light district.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another episode. Yeah. And probably for a different audience. So we're there, and we're expecting like something real serious. We practice for the week, and we're getting ready and leading up to it. And then I remember it's game day. We're over there. We're taping. Everyone's getting ready for the game, and I had to walk out of the locker room to get something, or it was going out to like just get some fresh air, or do something out of the locker room. And I'm getting ready to come back in. I look over to my left, and here come some of the players of the other team carrying a freaking keg.
Oh boy.
And smoking cigarettes. I'm just like, okay, so we're taking this way more serious, or they're really just really good. They're just really good to kill us, right? But we ended up winning that game like 70-7. Like, so it's like, but we didn't even get to play. So there's a soccer stadium which houses the Frankfurt Galaxy. So we played earlier in the day, and then we stayed there, and then the NFL Europe team had a game in the evening. We were in the boxes. We were their guests.
Pretty cool.
We played outside. I mean, I'd never experienced like a soccer environment in Germany. And so imagine of all places, right?
They have some of the wildest fans.
Man, it's like hundreds of acres of just a carnival and a party outside during our game. Mm-hmm. So they have like literally a techno, which rave or whatever, some EDM stuff going on over as far as I can see, like maybe 5 football fields away. And there's people just going crazy over there. And then right beside our field is literally like a carnival, and they had a mechanical bull. They had all this stuff. So as you can imagine, after the game, we might have rode the bull with our equipment on. I mean, I'm not. It may or may not happen.
There's probably not any video. So
no, didn't exist then. No phones.
Smart.
But it was a really cool, really wild experience. And I had like 5 sacks, 6 sacks. I had a really good game, and the DN was a former D1 guy, big guy, and.
You a linebacker or a lineman?
I played DN on that. So I played some outside linebacker, but at that point I was playing DN.
How much you weigh then?
I don't know, 240 maybe.
It's a big boy.
Yeah, I could move. I could move pretty well.
Well, yeah, I know you were saying when you were like a senior, you were 170, 180. So I was wondering what the progression was like.
Yeah, I think at my biggest I was 265. So so it was 240 there, and then that night again. So then. Literally, I'm expecting, because you grow up seeing football on TV, right? And you've been to some football games. And you're like, this is a football crowd. I know what an NFL game looks like. I know I've experienced that. And then we go to this Frankfurt Galaxy game, and it's literally a soccer crowd. So there's this, Frankfurt would throw an interception, and the fans would go wild and love it and blow whistles and confetti and all the other stuff. And I'm just like, hey, that was not a good play. What is wrong with these people? And then coach was like, hey, they don't understand football at all over here. Just let it go.
Steve, for just like a point of reference, pull up this. Go to YouTube and search Bayern Munich Tifo. The word is TIFO. I'm sure you've seen some of these. Like, people are like, oh, NFL fans in the United States are crazy. I'm like, you don't even understand.
People are passing. People are passing out of these games.
ER, you'll see them. ER and Bayern, and then just search like Tifo, TIFO. Yeah, so I'm sure that's like a interesting moment in your life because you're a small town kid.
Yeah.
Had you gotten a chance to travel a lot prior to that?
No, not really. No.
Yeah, go to like clip little video.
No, and it was just a way different experience, and just being around Frankfurt.
Oh yeah, sure. There you go. I mean, so for those just watching, you can Google it yourself, but these fans are nuts. They have pyrotechnics in the stands. They have like tens of thousands of people with flags, and what they'll do is they'll have these like choreographed like things. You can find some even better ones than that. They'll have these like choreographed like pictures that they make with like signs, and they'll pull over like different cloths and things like that. I mean, I'm sure you can find a bunch of them, but oh yeah, those fans are just wild. I went to Ajax Stadium in Holland when I was, I don't know, probably like 12 or 13 on like an exchange trip. And we entered the stadium, and I'm like in the stadium, we're doing a tour, and they have these like big plexiglass walls in between this section with like steel on, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like barbed wire essentially on
pretty
top.
much.
Here you go. Here's some more stuff. Yeah, just madness. Like
it was the craziest thing ever, because again, it took tailgating to a whole new level when you have a mechanical bull in the parking lot, and you can buy, you're buying steins with mugs full of beer everywhere, and it was fun. It was different. It was fun, and I think obviously being exposed to things like that, we're a product of our experiences, right? So they get to experience that and kind of store it somewhere, and they pull that back, and the kids like some of those stories too. But
yeah, I just saw this quote from Anthony Bourdain. We were talking about your restaurant days moments before we walked back in, and he says something along the lines of, travel is not an escape from work. Travel is a education for life. Yep. I just love that.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Whenever I go and visit somewhere, you just bring so much more back than you had previous. Yeah, you're probably good, Steve.
Yeah, that's I like that. I like that because that was exactly what it was. And then I came back, and I think the plan was that I was going to step into maybe eventually a leadership role within the football program and everything else. And then the paperwork that I had filed to transfer to Slippery Rock kind of happened late again, because I'm so good at that stuff. And then I remember walking in and telling my coach, because he's just like, we got, you got a big role for you. You stayed here this summer, you train with, you're faster, you're stronger, you're bigger, kind of building off the game, the time that you had in Europe. And I'm like, I'm transferring.
About that, coach.
Yeah, hey, and I might have been called every name, and
that always makes the departure a little easier.
Yeah,
when your ex is like, "You're a piece of," and you're like, "All right, well, this was a good decision."
Yeah. Well, and I just, it was hard, because I'm a 20-year-old kid, and
you don't want to disappoint people.
I'm just like, man, I love this program, I love the team, but I've got to do something for me now. Like, it's time to. This doesn't fit with my goals anymore. I love football. I love this aspect of it, but it doesn't fit. And I really liked him I liked him as a coach. He was a great guy, and there were all kinds of different coaches, within that program at Susquehanna. And again, I took something from every one of them. There was one guy there, one coach who wasn't my positions coach, and every morning, it'd be wet grass, and he'd make sure we laid down the stretch in it, first thing or whatever. And he'd be like, kind of, good morning, ladies. This is today is October 7th, 2023. And then there'd be a pause, and he'd be like, this is the last October 7th, 2023 you ever have. And I'm just like, what is his point? Like, what are you talking about? Like, dude, I'm freaking laying in this mud puddle. Yeah. You put me right in this mud puddle, you ass. And then, then as I got older, I'm like, man, this guy had more value than what I understood at the time. And like, he's basically saying, what are you doing today? What are you going to do today to make yourself better, to make this the best day you can? Don't take anything for granted. And so like, that was, I learned to appreciate that later. And I never thanked them, but I probably should have, later on in life. But there were some other coaches there. Like, I think, so when you come in as a freshman, this is again, way back in the day, they put, tape on your helmet, and mine said Hoy. Obviously your last name, there's a lot of players and everybody gets to know each other. And then I think, I joke with my kids, like I was always getting called out in video for, and there was always the F-bomb in front of my name. And so like they started calling me F and Hoy, because it's like, there he is. There he went again. You blew coverage on that. You're supposed to drop back and do that. I'm like, yeah, well, I made the tackle. It doesn't matter. You didn't, if you weren't doing what you're supposed to do, everybody has a role. This is part of a team. So it's like, he was making a valid point about, hey, I have a role in the team. Don't try to be the hero. And so like, I felt like that was a really good coaching staff. And I know that the head coach at the time, the one that I told him I was transferring, and I probably felt like I was more important than I really was, but that's kind of the way you are when you're 20 years old, right? And I think he had a master's in coaching from Springfield College. Like, he had a background in this kind of stuff. And I thought he was an excellent coach, and that same program. So now I'm out of college, and they had a position for a strength coach. They created a strength coach position. They had a new facility. Everything was really nice. And I literally sent him a resume because I had U.S. Olympic Committee and team training experience. I was running NFL combines or pre-combine training out of Pittsburgh. I was doing all these things. So I had a good enough resume to coach at a D3 school, right? And have an impact. And I feel like I had a lot I could do with that program. And I sent it to him, and he literally sent it back with a Post-it note on it. And it's like, sorry, maybe check back in a few years from now or something like that. It was like, I'm like, it's been 5 years. This dude isn't over this yet. And I'm like, he's not gonna remember me. And it was like, because he was like assistant AD or something at the time. And I got it back. I'm like, damn, he's still, okay, all right, I left, all right, whatever. And he might not have been pissed if he's like, yeah, this guy's not loyal to the program. So who knows what the reason was, but
hey, that loyal to the program thing, I've seen it go the other direction where you hire people that are like not the right fit.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
a thing,
And then obviously I got more experience, and then some things opened up later on, and I'm like, hey, they're reaching out. I'm like, no, I'm not interested anymore. Like, I've surpassed what you're looking for. So
you get involved. How do you get involved with the Olympic teams, and where in the world does that go? Because it sounded like you were coach, but also sort of participant.
Well, I wasn't really a participant. I did some of this stuff, but I'll back up. So I transferred to Slippery Rock. It is everything as advertised for exercise science, like the professors, the program, the education. Yeah, I mean, everything is the connections. What they were doing with exercise science was above and beyond anything anywhere else. So like I'm very grateful for my time there. And even there, there were some issues of me getting into the program because I came in with so many credits, and you had to be in. But I got in. They got it all figured out. And I had a professor that was only a few years older than me at the time, who was a strength coach, and went back to grad school as a PhD, did all that stuff. And then he also played college football, and then he was also an alternate on the bobsled team at one time. And I said, hey, I need an internship to graduate. And you should know a little bit about my mindset by this point. I'm like, hey, what's the hardest one out there to get? And he's like, man, the USOC, because they have 3 locations. Like, you can either go to Lake Placid at their Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid. You can go to Colorado Springs, or at the time, which I don't think it's now not owned by the Olympic Committee anymore, was Chula Vista. So there was one in California where they had a lot of the summer event athletes. So your track and everything was out there, but I think it's privately owned now. I think it's a different setup. So it's really basically Colorado Springs and Lake Placid. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get it.
Give it hell.
Yeah. And he's just like, we'll do everything, and he, again, he's a very positive. He's like, well, let's put together what we need. It's figured out. You're gonna. And so I send my stuff, and again, this is nothing's electronic. I think.
It's all physical mail.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you guys are younger, but they weren't even. It was like, man, they were like typewriters, and there was something in between. I can't remember what they're called now, but it wasn't even a computer, but like a little digital flat panel screen, and you had to see what you were typing and putting it in there.
Okay.
And but anyway, so I typed it up, sent it out through mail, and then I actually got a phone call from the head strength coach. And it turns out he was a former wrestler, so that helps me.
You go.
That's a good. I'm telling you, man. It's like it's not what you know till you know, right?
It's a family.
It
right?
is. And he interviewed me and said there were a couple thousand applicants, and then I actually got a call from the guy in Colorado Springs, the head strength coach there too, and he's just like, hey, I had an opportunity to pick between the 2 facilities, so I not only get one, I was the first pick between 2 facilities, and I said. Well, I think the guy in Colorado, obviously wrestling, it's a much bigger facility. It's all these cool things, but I'm like, it's a lot of your traditional sports too. Like, if I really want to be good, I need to be uncomfortable and learn sports that I know nothing about. So now you're talking about like, speed skating, ski jumping, freestyle aerialists, the luge, bobsled, just a lot of non-traditional sports that like you can't just go find a program anywhere. You can't talk to somebody that has a lot of experience working with that team because it doesn't exist, right? And like, all right, I'm going to Lake Placid. And then I get ready to go to Lake Placid, and the guy calls me and he's like, man, yeah, he's like, you're going to love it here. He's like, I'm leaving tomorrow for a new job. I'm like, amazing. This is great. But the guy,
I don't know anyone at this school
I know,
now.
yeah, but the guy that they hired, has been was one of the most knowledgeable strength coaches ever.
Who's that?
Kevin Ebel was his name. And he basically taught, or was kind of guidance for a lot of this generation or my generation of strength coaches who are now like the experts. But Kevin isn't even a strength coach anymore. He does, so talk about people different things. Now he basically remodels homes and does things out in Wisconsin. Because if you get to the root of what probably he and myself really like to do, I like to build things, right? And I was asked a question before I came to Ohio State. They're like, hey, what if you weren't a strength coach, what would you be doing? I'm like, whatever it is, maybe building houses, building furniture, I would be building something, because I like to build. And that's part of my attraction to the team stuff. Is like, I want to build a successful team. I like to build things. And then it's like, once it's built, maybe I got to go build something else, or I want to win, but then I want to be able to contribute and figure out what helped me build that to make that successful, so I can go build that again. So Kevin was awesome. And I went up there, and I remember, a lot of internships you go to these days, like you don't get to do anything. You're literally just watching and being like, well, we're going to teach you more theory. And it's like, well, that's amazing. Great. Like, why am I here? He's just like, go coach, go coach. And then I'm going to rip you apart because you suck. It's like, awesome. I can't wait, man. I can't wait. But Kevin was a gigantic man at the time. Then he had some back problems, but he was, I think he was almost 300 pounds, and we had a competition up there who could gain weight the fastest, and like, who can gain the most weight by this date. And then I remember I was hitting like the Wendy's drive-through like 3 times a day.
What a healthy staff.
Yeah, man, it's amazing. We lead by example, of course, right?
It's funny because I always look at. I think this is sort of changing, but you watch like an NFL game, you see all the coaches, you're like, these guys all look terrible. They look like they're really like. I know it's a stressful job, but there's a couple of guys. Notre Dame's coach, I was looking at him on the side, I'm like, this guy's jacked.
Yeah,
but a lot of the coaches, you're like, these guys don't look that great, which is funny because you're like, these are the most elite athletes in the world, the most, just intense, physical, like you said, almost at some capacity, violent guys. And then they got like this soft, pudgy coach. I'd say that's like 9 out of 10 of them. And I'm like, there just seems like there's a gap here somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, stress, that is another episode too, how to handle stress and breathing and how all that kind of stuff. There's some different things that go into play there. But a lot of these guys, just don't wear it very well. Right. And
slamming coffee.
They do nothing to change
nicotine
that. No. And it's like then they end up so unhealthy so fast, right? So Kevin taught me, a ton of stuff. I was there. Got to coach, and some people always say like, they're like, well, who'd you get to work with up there? I got to work with everybody, right? All the sports that were housed out of there, bobsled, luge, and then I don't know if you remember. I don't think they still have them at the Goodwill Games.
I remember hearing about them, but I don't know much about them.
So the Olympics, obviously, every 4 years, and then every 2 years in between the Olympics basically was a Goodwill game. And it was an international competition. And I was fortunate enough that when I was in Lake Placid, they hosted that Goodwill game.
That's cool.
So basically they hosted the Olympics at that time. And I was engaged at the time to my wife now, and she flew up. And I don't know if you remember, do you remember who Dr. Ruth is? Mm-mm. She's like a sex therapist, was like this famous old little lady, right? Yeah. So my wife, ironically enough, it was like a 5-seat plane, and she was on a plane with her up to Lake Placid, which was weird. That's just a little tidbit about that. She comes up and we go to, I'm like, hey, what events you want to go to? I got VIP passes. We can go anywhere. We can go to opening ceremonies. And she's like, we're going to figure skating. And it's like, that's not typically my first pick, but yeah, we'll go. And it was actually pretty cool because, have you skated?
I cannot skate. I've skated one time in my life.
When you see, I think we were like right up against the boards. When you see what they can do, like there was the one lady from France, a young woman that could do. She did a backflip while she's skating and landed on one skate and kept skating.
Isn't that the illegal technique? Right? Isn't that like the only one that's ever been landed?
I think and she did it like twice in her thing, and it's like, and it literally like she's skating everywhere around, and then all of a sudden she does it like in front of me, and my wife. I'm just like, that might have been the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like that was. I was almost speechless. Like this was incredible.
Yeah.
And
well, you can get going so fast on skates, you know, like that's the thing that I think land athletes like me, like, oh, I can run pretty fast. Like, okay, you're fast. You can run 20 miles an hour. The guys on skates, girls on skates, they get going like 30, 40, way faster.
And you're balancing. The figure skating blade is high. I mean, you're balancing, your ankle stability, everything has to be incredible. So like she was incredible athlete. And so we got to see some really cool stuff up there. And we went to ski jumping. You ever see ski jumping?
Not in person.
So you take the elevator up to the top and you're watching like, and they're going all the way down landing, and you know it's pretty incredible. And
that's another sport where it's like, how did you get into this?
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering, that kind of stuff. So like they had a development, like a youth and a junior developmental program, because I'm just like, you know, what is your like long-term development system? Like where do you get these athletes? Where do you get them from? And so they do have skiers, they have tryouts, they have different people that come, and they had basically a school up there. And then they have tutors, like they have a school. So these kids are kind of homeschooled, if you will, but it's before online schooling, all this stuff. And so they'd all go to the school, the tutors would go around with them, and they would be in this junior development program. And it was the same for like, how does a kid gravitate or graduate into more advanced levels of luge or bobsled or other things like that? Well, they start them at 14. They start them younger, learning some of the basics and principles, and they do some competitions nationally, internationally, whatever. So there is kind of a pipeline, but it's something you don't hear about or don't know about anywhere, right? Like even you, like right now, did you know that existed, right?
Well, it probably doesn't exist in Brazil, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Maybe in Sweden, it's more popular.
Yeah. But so that, and then freestyle aerials, where it's the ones that they come down and they go up this and do all these flips and things and land and
it's like gymnastics.
Basically they're like, where do you want to stand for this when you're watching it? I'm like, I don't know, where should I stand? Like, stand right here at the bottom of the hill. People are gonna knock themselves out. I'm like, yeah. Right. Yeah, that's what I want to see, right?
Yeah, I want to see somebody get messed up.
Oh man, right. And it's like, it's crazy because they sometimes they over rotate by like that much. It's enough to smack the back of their head right off the ground, basically.
But they're going like 25 plus feet in the air.
Dude, they're so high in the air. And I'm because you're at the bottom looking up, and you're like, man, I would not do that. That's crazy. And then they practice. There was a pool down below where they practice in the summertime. They practice in like foam or an aerated pool, all these things. So it's pretty neat.
But it's funny because those people, they probably think that's so normal, and then they'd watch you go like get hit in football or hit someone and be like, this guy's a maniac. I would never do this.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you say that, because they would say, they're just like, you know, oh, you played all these sports, you're an athlete. I'm like, I'm watching you up there do this, you're an athlete. Like, no, we're a party sport. And then, because like Red Bull sponsored their stuff, and it was like this huge, like speakers the size of this room. We're at the foot of the mountain that we're on, and it's like booming, and everybody's just having a good time while they're flipping and doing all the crazy stuff.
I would not party before your sport, football, like that German team.
Yeah,
not something I'd do. I'm not partying either before I go fly 20 feet in the air.
Not a chance. Neither. Not a chance. Mm-mm. Not a chance. But it was cool. So I got to see all that stuff, and then, you know, I got to work with them leading up to that. Then I got to see them compete, which a lot of people don't with the Olympics, right? Because it's every 4 years. So do you really get? And then a lot of their competitions are overseas. You really don't get to see your athletes compete, which is what you want to do, because like, hey, is it really working? So now there's a lot of sport technology and sports science stuff that you can get all the data you want to find out if certain things are working. But like, are you just going to base it off of how they place? Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe they landed all the jumps they wanted, but some of that stuff's judges, so it's subjective to the judges, right? Like it's whatever they say. So I learned a lot there. While I was there, I went through. I got to get in the bobsled a little bit. Got to do some of the luge push starts. They had an indoor facility, you know, and it's like, hey, these are good times, and I'm like, well, I hit those times, you know. It's like, you know, what is your broad jump? Well, I hit that too. So it's like,
for anybody who's listening, Jeremy, you just want to give us like your current stats. You're like what, 6'4", 6'5"?
About 6'4", yeah.
In 250, 240, you know, and then you were probably like
240. You know, it's about the same then. You know, just a. Maybe not as much body fat. Yes, you know, I'm obviously not fat.
Jeremy's a lean guy. Don't get him wrong.
And that's part of, you know, that wrestling mentality too, is like you're used to being so kind of shredded, and then when you're not, you're like, oh man, I'm so fat. You know.
And is that like the skill set they look for in a bobsledder, like big, strong, fast? Is that kind of it?
That's it now. Like, and
but you don't. Does it matter if you're like light? You want to be heavy, almost, right?
They've got it down to. such a science based on what position you're going to have. Like a
Interesting.
driver they want this build for a driver. They want this build for this build for this build for this.
Interesting.
And it's very similar to, I had some, and I know I like to jump around a little bit, but I had some hockey players that ended up being involved in pit crew for NASCAR.
Yeah.
And it was just something that there was a guy in Pittsburgh that came through, and he's just like, hey, I represent Hendrick Motorsport, and we go around and we look for athletes to come down to our combine. We have a combine down in I think it was Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have anybody? And I'm like, well, you gotta tell me what you're looking for. So he called me, then he met with me and went over everything. He's like, if you're this guy, you gotta be this height, and you have to be able to jump this, and we have a couple standard tests you have to do
this.
certain heights. Yeah, like they did vertical jump, and he's like, we get a lot of football players. We've never had a hockey player, and I'm like, well, you're gonna have these hockey players. Their hand-eye is ridiculous, and he's like, so we need a guy. I'm like, I got a guy, a lefty that could be a tire guy for you. Let me talk to him. So I talked to him, and he's like, his dad, ironically enough, was the one that really started teaching me about business when I went to that first job in Pittsburgh, which we'll get to maybe. I don't know. We'll see. And then, so Tim Hall was the dad's name, and Timmy was the son. And Timmy was an athlete I started working with when he was 9 years old. Mm. And by this time he had played Division I hockey, he had played pro. And some guy gave him a dirty hit when he was playing, like an elbow to the head or something into the boards, and basically that concussion ended his career. And so now they're like, well, I need something that, but he was a ridiculous athlete, one of the best athletes I think I've ever been around. Just smaller guy, but just quick, gritty, worked hard, and super skilled, like picked up things real quick. And so I talked to him, and he's just like, yeah, let's do it. So I train him for the combine. He goes down, gets invited back again, and actually makes the pit crew. And
so is he a tire guy?
He was a changer. He was the drill, like that guy, right? And like just taking him off, and he was lefty, but his hands were so steady and so smooth, and his hand-eye coordination.
Talk about jobs that you didn't know existed.
I
right?
know. And then, dude, there's money in that too.
Oh,
man.
I believe it. And I mean, NASCAR.
I think at the time they were saying that because the guy explained it to me. He's like, hey, your average guy will come in. So he was early 20s, mid 20s, and he's like, and then we're done. They're done by like 33, 34. And what happens is they will usually, because of the network that they make, so they go to events. When you go to a NASCAR race, they're there 4 or 5 days early, right? They're there, whatever it is, they're there early. They're setting up, making sure the lug nuts are glued on correctly. Everything's done the way it's supposed to be done, or whatever the role is. And then they test run to make sure the car is all set up. Everything's the way it's supposed to be. But they're also at events, and they're meeting these corporate sponsors. They're meeting all these executives at these big companies. He's like, so by the time they're 32, 33, and maybe physically they're being beat out now by a guy that's 26, they move into a role with one of these executive companies. They're like, I'm a manager for Xerox now, or I'm a high level guy. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you have some backing to do some stuff because they've seen your work ethic, you've connected with them and done some stuff. So it's a really cool system. And then I think they changed it now because Hendrick used to overstack. Like they might have like 3 full pit crews, and they'll train them, and they'll live in Charlotte. And then instead of Penske or somebody else having a pit crew, they'll pay Hendrick, like, hey, we'll take one of your pit crews, and then so they take them on the road. But now they don't let it. I think they don't allow it to happen. But that is something very specific about, like you were asking about bobsled. There's a very specific role, and they got down to like the size. You have to be between 6'2" and 6'4.5", and this has to be your weight for this, and you have to get these times on these tests and jump this height. And I think they have bobsled down to that now. Like I haven't communicated with them a lot. We do have a guy at the gym training that wants to be on the bobsled team, but I will reach out to them and kind of find out what they're like. Obviously, with anything else, hey, these are our minimum standards, but that doesn't mean anything. That means like they might know your name once, and then it's like they want to know, like I want to know what it's going to take. Like what do you have to hit? So I was in that range before, and there would have been opportunities for me to like, hey, do I want to give this a go?
Become a bobsledder.
Yeah, I want to become a bobsledder, and they're trying to encourage me, like, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you stay? And again, so I'm engaged at the time. And I'm like, what does that look like? Well, we're going to France for 2 months. We're doing this. And I'm like, well,
that doesn't sound bad. Come on,
man.
Yeah.
Like who comes with? Did she come with me? And like, no,
there's no money in bobsled for plus ones.
No, and then there isn't. No, and then and they're like, and then you're staying in this cabin like this size with like 6 other dudes in 6 feet of snow. And I'm just like, man, I don't know. Like part of me wants to try this Olympic athlete and go after it. But like, I knew some guys that have been there for like 2 Olympics already and have not made they're training. And then they're an alternate. So they don't even get to do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't do that. I'm ready. I'm kind of ready to go and get my life on. And but that's kind of my bobsled story there. And I think it's amazing. Like people don't understand. It's like there's some things like you can try a lot of sports, but you'll never understand the G-forces or what toll it takes on the body or the risk of like the bobsled wrecking and doing like certain things.
There's people who've died. I mean, what was the last? It was a couple of Olympics ago where I don't know if it was a bobsledder or it was like a 2-person luge. I
think it was a luge. I think I know what you're talking about, where it went off the track.
It went off the track and it hit a beam that they had.
Yeah.
And I think they had to like alter the track. So they're like, this is not safe. We can't leave this. Yeah.
Well, and then you wear, so like, I think I was there for maybe 2 months, and then this guy came back. They were overseas competing somewhere. He was a luger, and he has this huge bandage on his whole arm. And I was like, dude, what happened, man? He's like, I burnt my arm. Oh, I'm like, doing what? And he's like, well, you know how we wear like this flame retardant suit. We wear all these layers, and he's like, the luge got out of control, and it kind of wrecked it. And I put my arm down on the ice. And it just basically burnt me going so fast, so much. Like you're like, well, there's no friction on ice. What are you talking about? And like that's enough that it basically just melted his skin off his arm. And I'm like, sign me up, dude. I want to do that. Like, I want that. I want a piece of that action, But he came back and kept doing it. I think one of the craziest is skeleton.
That's the one person, right?
Head first.
Oh.
One person head first.
You talk about like, where did this sport come from?
Yeah. Well, and there was a guy. His name was Jimmy Shea. I think is his name. And Jimmy Shea was like a 3rd generation skeleton guy from Lake Placid. So his like grandfather won a medal. His father won a medal. And this was like his 2nd or 3rd Olympics, and the dude had so much freaking pressure. You could sense the pressure in it. Like you look at his eyeballs, and you're like, all right, this guy's strung out a little bit. What's going on? And it was all about.
There you go. There's Jimmy Shea.
There's Jimmy Shea, man. Good dude.
Look at him just flying through. What is he doing there? Is he lifting up on that left-hand picture?
He's diving onto the. He just pushed. So you're pushed with the sled. You push with the sled, and you jump on, man.
Look at that little thing, man. It looks like you remember. I don't know if you had these when you were a kid in gym class. They're like these 4 little wheels, and they had the handles like the plat. It looked like a cart, like a little cart. Yeah. What kind of a weird toy was that? I don't know, but that's what that looks like, man. What a maniac.
Well, because in reality, there's no money. There's no money in these sports, and that was one of the things that that resonated a lot with me was like these athletes, all these Olympic athletes.
Oh, interesting. He's like pushing to the side of it, kind of.
Yeah, you run beside it. And
he's zipping, man. So how fast does this guy get going? For anyone who's just listening,
dude,
we're watching a video of Jimmy Shea.
Well over 70 miles per hour.
What a strange thing, dude. Head first.
Dude, look at that. Like,
it's like snowing. Look how crazy it is.
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
Yeah, this like makes me think of like if you ever like fall off of like a canoe or rafting in a river, they tell you the first thing is like, don't start swimming because you're going to go head first into a rock. Yep. They're like, put your feet up.
That's right.
That's what that guy's doing.
And keep your feet together.
Yeah. He's just going head first into that rock.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But like, yeah, that was one thing part of the experience that really resonated with me is that these athletes, they're not there for the money, man.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like wrestling, right?
Yeah, same thing. Like, it's like you're there, they're there for the opportunity to hang the flag, to hold the flag over their head and listen to the national anthem. Like there's a lot of pride, a lot of hard work, a lot of injuries, a lot of things that you don't see and they come right back. And that's where I think they do make money with the corporate sponsors, because they get to go speak and present and tell their story. And obviously the ones that do that are the ones that win. Nobody wants. No one's hiring.
Cares about 7th place.
No one's hiring those people anymore, right? Yeah. You still might have a great story to tell and some adversity and stuff you had to overcome, but it's just not. It's not getting hired. So like these guys end up working real jobs, and even the bobsledders, some of them have some of the guys will work remotely back then, even like doing some IT jobs or doing some different things. Or we had some guys in the Army who let them come train, and they were former Division I track guys. So these guys could fly and they were pretty jacked too. Some were pole vaulters, different. We had such a diverse group, and they train. I mean, they train hard. I mean, they train real hard, and there's a lot there. But it's like you still gotta make some money and do something and live.
You ever regret not going for it?
No.
Worked out the way
it worked out because it's like, I try to be as present as possible and not, and obviously where you are present can shape your past, and you go back and you kind of reflect on that kind of stuff. And I feel like that I would never do anything differently because it would change where I am today and possibly who I am today. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I part of my why is my kids. Like I love my kids and my family so much. I'm a big family guy, and I've had other opportunities to do different things over the years, and it's like, I'm exactly where I am today because of those choices, and that includes my kids and my wife. Like, we are because of those choices. So I wouldn't change that.
Yeah. So the internship at the Olympic situation ends.
Yep, it ends, and at this point, obviously, I'm all in on. I want to be a strength coach. I learned how to do luge and bobsled and even speed skating. So speed skating was there for the Goodwill Games, and a big name that most people don't know or that do know but didn't know. I knew when he was 16 was Apollo Antonono.
Yep.
And so he trained.
That's about like the one or two.
Yeah.
Like
so I got to work with him.
What kind of an athlete was that guy like off the ice?
He's super strong. Like
really?
Lower body was ridiculous. I remember, and I think he came in.
Well, it's like all pushing,
Dude, his quads were, just ginormous. And
it's kind of like those
kids come in at
like
16.
Speed bikers, not the long distance bikers, but like the short track bikers. Yep. Their quads are just like disproportionately large.
Yeah. Well, that was it. He came in, and I think I told the story to some of my staff. It's like other coaches. He walks in and his strength coach is like, he's going to go warm up, and then I want you to take him through his program. And I look over and I'm like, this kid's 16. His upper body didn't look that, that strong, that thick. He's short, compared to me, obviously. He got some baggy sweatpants on, and he goes over and he's like, got 225 on the bar. And I'm like, this kid's 16. He's warming up. I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, like go over. And then like he gets warmed up and then takes his sweatpants off. And I'm like, my God, this guy's got, his quads are ginormous. And I can't remember what weight I'm using, but he was super strong, and his work ethic was insane, man. The kid just worked. And then that was the first time I saw anybody take like the spin bikes and just take the seats off and hover about that much above the posts and just bike at a high rate, just bike and bike and bike and bike. And
that sounds terrible. It sounds like torture.
It is. But for them, that's at that low sit position, and they would get in a position where that's how they're skating in that low sit position. And the demand on the quads was absolutely insane. So as you know, I like to steal things like that. So I used it with a lot of my hockey players, and they loved it. Absolutely loved it. They're like, where'd you get this? I'm like, hey, it's good enough for Apollo. It's good enough for you.
Yeah, like, dang it.
Yeah.
Probably is good then. Wow, that's amazing.
But he worked. I mean, he worked his butt off, and the coaches. I always say that. So we watch what coaches do. We take good coaches, right? Even bad coaches, and we learn from all those people. The coaches for all these Olympic teams and these groups that came up there were amazing, in that they just loved to talk about coaching and sharing in their sport. And part of being a strength coach for a team or a sport you know nothing about is you got to get immersed into it. You got to figure out the physiology, the mindset, everything that goes into this sport, and what is going to make these athletes better, right? And so the speed skating coach is like, hey, I want you to you got to be at the rink at this time. And he literally sat me on a bucket in the middle of the rink, and these guys are all skating around me. And I'm just watching it, and I just literally took notes, and as much as I could. Again, there's no phones, so like I'm taking notes and writing stuff down. And I'm like, these people are amazing. Like they are flying around here, and they're like this close to falling all the time because they're angled their blade. I'm like, man, this is insane.
Yeah, sometimes they'll get nudged and they'll just like lose it.
Yeah,
you see that all the time.
Yep. And then when they started really getting after it, he's like, get off the ice, go over here, because somebody could spill and just take you out. And they had all the crash pads up, and
you don't want to.
I don't want a blade coming through me, man. So it was pretty cool. And the same thing with like hockey and other sports. Like they wanted me there, they wanted me to practice, they wanted me watching these kids and watching the events, and that's kind of how you really get involved in it. But the point there was that we grow, right, and only with help from other people, right? So like the support staff these Olympic coaches were willing to pour into me as an intern, which was pretty awesome, because that doesn't happen enough anymore. Most people aren't willing to share, or they're willing to share, and how much of it doesn't look authentic, right? Because like they're only going to put out little things to draw you into their program. You pay for their program, and then that's it, right? It's like these guys, this was like, they were so passionate about it. They just wanted to help people and try to grow the sport and help everyone else grow from this. So that was cool. And then even some of the like when for the Goodwill Games, when coaches came in from Germany and from other countries, we had a huge room, and there were chalkboards back then. This wasn't dry erase. So like we had chalkboards up, and they're literally drawing up and talking about exercise science and kind of this strength training and stuff they're doing for their jumping programs and everything they're doing for their athletes, which I mean, I learned so much during that whole experience that I feel like if you weren't there during Goodwill Games, you would still learn a lot. But it's like I've benefited so much more from that international component and aspect of this is how we do things over here. Because like, well, we don't have 20 squat racks. We don't have these boxes. We don't have this. And it's like, hey, we have an ice rink with a couple of concrete blocks and a couple of sandbags. And this is what we do. I'm like, that's incredible. Like, that's like getting back to the farm, man. I love it. Like, yeah, it's great. You carry each other around. I love it. You got two guys on your back and you're squatting. I love it. So it was really cool kind of seeing all that. And then, so after, I'm all in on being a strength coach and everything. Like I think you had mentioned, I don't know if it was during part of this, or if it was earlier, like how my path has been kind of all over the place, right?
To this point, we've only heard linear.
As a strength coach, to get into to be a strength coach, most people go at that time, way back as 2000, they would go to get a GA position to get experience. Like, so you're a grad assistant, you're getting a master's degree, and basically just getting grad school paid for, but then you're a strength coach. That's what you're doing. So I'm thinking, well, that's a traditional route. There's no, like, private sector facilities were few and far between. They really didn't exist that much. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right, well, let's see what that looks like. So, I had interviewed for some different strength conditioning graduate assistant positions that open up, and the advantage of being at the Olympic Training Center is now you can take your phone book. People don't have phone books anymore, but I had a phone book, there were special phone books through the NCAA that I had access to, and it was an actual book they mailed you with all the college strength coaches and phone numbers and stuff. They had it at the training center. And so my caller ID, which was actually a land phone, my caller ID back then would have been in the United States Olympic Training Center. And so I could just literally call anybody and be like, I'm the coolest dude in here, man. Like, they will, like, everybody answered, like, oh, man. Yep. Like, oh, man, sorry, I missed your call. And like,
Yeah, it's okay this time, but don't let it happen again.
They didn't have to know I'm an intern. It's like, yeah, just calling from the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, New York. Got a quick question. Do you have any graduate assistant positions? Mm-hmm. It's not like I'm running through and like, oh, yeah, but we can create one. You got somebody you got somebody in mind? I'm like, yeah, me. And like, oh, cool. So like it opened, and there were all these opportunities. And then I remember going down. I was at the University of Miami, interview for a position. They're like, "Yeah, we'd love to have you here. This would be great." And like, well, what's the pay as a graduate assistant? Is there anything? Like, oh, we give you shoes and shirts. And I'm like, man, this is Miami, man. Miami is not cheap. and I don't know how I'd make. Well, we feed you sometimes. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. But I was still thinking about it, because I'm like, you're getting pushed. Society tells you, or the industry tells you, this is the one path you've got to take to get to this role. And I've always had a hard time with that, because it's like, I want to be like a big old FU. Like, I'm going to get there when I want to get there on my time. This has nothing to do with you, and I don't care about the industry, right? Because you don't know me, and you don't know my goals, my vision, and I'm going to create my own path. And I used to think that was me being rebellious, but that's kind of the entrepreneur lifestyle, right? That's
so many of the people that I've talked to on this podcast, that is something they echo, man. If that's one thing that I've taken away, it's like when everyone goes this direction, the person who goes that way is like, oh, I'm going to check that thing out over there.
Yep.
Like, they're usually the person who ends up, making it somewhere different, making it somewhere unique. You want to have a regular life? Go ahead. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the people who are going to do things differently, it's like Steve Jobs' old thing, like, think different.
Yep.
It seems to work for a lot of the people that I've talked to.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And so being engaged at a time, I'm just like, you know what? I think there's a lot of, I don't like to put myself in situations where I could end up getting in some trouble with temptation, right? So it's like Miami. If you've been to Miami, there are beautiful women everywhere in Miami.
Yep,
And
been there.
I'm just like, man, like
you probably weren't making enough money at that time.
No,
the guys are driving their Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
It's like a whole other world down there.
I might have to like play the homeless role and try to do something different there. But I'm just like, hey, I really am committed to my fiance. I want to get married. I want to do all the right things. And so I started making a bunch of other phone calls about private sector facilities. And at the time they just opened up this, they were opening up this new facility in Pittsburgh. And it was a huge complex, and it was owned by the Hillman Company, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. They own a lot of stuff out of Pittsburgh, one of the wealthy company in Pittsburgh. And, which I later learned was a toxic dump site. And they had to do some kind of project. They wanted to donate it as a park, but the EPA or the community was like, yeah, we don't need people glowing down here, right? And it was on an island in Pittsburgh on the Ohio River, so Neville Island. And so
sounds lovely.
So they paid money to basically elevate and put soil in and cap off that whole thing and put 40 something feet of island above that. And then they put this sports complex on top of it, but that you weren't allowed to build on certain areas because they had to be able to access to test the soil and all this other stuff. So they built this, and it had I think it was like an 8,000 square foot like fitness center, and they were looking for an assistant director. And I'm like, man, like that does not sound attractive to me. Like I want to be a strength coach. And the guy I talked to was Tim Hall, who was a VP or an executive for the Hillman Company. And it was he was overseeing that project. So it had like 2 hockey rinks, an full-size indoor football field, inside one of the domes. Like it was a pretty spectacular facility. It was like $26 million back then, $26 million, which would probably be $100 million now. I mean, it was, or more, who knows if it ever get built. But so I interviewed for the job, and I said, hey, I'm not a fitness guy. I'm a strength coach. There's a difference. And he's like, I know there's a difference. And he understood it. He was a college athlete, and he was friends with strength coach from Chicago Bulls and some other places. So he knew some people, and he's like, look, I know that. He's like, we want to build a program here. And he's like, you come down as the assistant and you build a program, and we'll kind of go from there. And I'm like, all right, what's it looking like? And he's like, all right, we'll pay you $23,000. And I'm like, man, I'm a millionaire. That's amazing. They're like, geez, like $23,000. All right, I'm going to live on somebody's floor, someone's couch. But luckily there were a bunch of guys I knew that lived in pretty close to there. That's what we did. We all had kind of starting jobs. One guy was a third assistant with the Steelers. Like they were all doing different things. And so it was like living in college all over again kind of thing. But, I took the job, and which was non-traditional, all right? Cause everybody's going the same route. And then while I'm there, the director, who wasn't making a ton of money, but she was making more than me, literally just stayed in the office and planned her wedding for that whole first year. So I was so frustrated, so pissed, like all the time.
Was she in like the strength coaching side?
No, she was a fitness facility, but I was doing all the work. And so like whatever. And then, so obviously I'm learning. That's kind of my first job, right? I'm not used to people not working.
Right.
And I'm just like, all right, well, luckily she got married like a year after I was there. And moved out of town with her husband. But so I took over as the director of everything. And by the time, while I'm there, I'm taking on more, and I'm bringing in a lot more money and looking at numbers. I don't even know what that stuff means. Like I'm great. Like, yeah, here's this, here's our bottom line, is our net. Like, I don't know what any of this stuff means. And so, Tim Hall is investing in teaching me this stuff. And some of his accountants and some people that work for that company are like, hey, we're going to meet with you and go over all these numbers and have you learn about business. And I kept saying, like, every 3 months, like, hey, can I get more money? Can I get more money? And he's just like, look, he goes, he's like, I've been around a lot of coaches, and a lot of strength coaches, a lot of pro sport teams. He's like, you will never get your money, you'll never see your worth or your value working for somebody else. And that was something that resonated with me like forever. Like it's still there. And it's like, you want to make more money, then you've got to go do your own thing. Yeah. And that's when like that, he said it, but it scared the hell out of me. Cause I'm like, I'm the little bit they're teaching me about business or teaching me about numbers, it was like nothing. I'm like, man, I know nothing about this. I don't know where to start to get money. I don't know any of this kind of stuff. And he said, well, come with questions. We'll meet. I'll help you out with some of this stuff. And And it was right around that time. Cause I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like I'm pretty sure I can get a job. I'll get a job as a strength coach in the NFL. I'll do something. I'll go that route. And then at that time I'm meeting other strength coaches that are in the NFL, and they're like, yeah, I've been in like 12 different cities in the last 14 years with my family. Ooh. Or I've been, I'm a Division I strength coach, and I've same thing. I keep working here. I get a year here, and then another higher assistant position opens up here, and I take my family there. And I'm like, man, I don't want that. I didn't have a kid yet, but I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that. And I'm like, to do that, I want to know that I can control where we're going, and not be at the liberty of somebody else saying, well, here's a job opening. Here's a job opening. I didn't want that ever. And so, I had a guy that I had hired to work for me, whose dad was involved in business too. And he's like, hey, you need to read this book. And it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. I think a lot of people have started. I mean,
that was one of the first like 2 or 3 business books that I read. And
I'm just like, it opened, again, for somebody that knew nothing about business. I've been doing a lot about hard work. And he's just like, the ESBI, the cash flow quadrant, all that stuff. And I teach these guys. I teach my kids about it. I taught my staff about it, believe it, man, it's like, hey, you guys, you want more money. Like, we have it set up that you can make more money. But if you want way more than that, you want more out of your life, go do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're afraid, then stop bitching about where you are, because this is where you're going to be. This is where you're going to be, right? And you're always going to have the same position. So I'm teaching about investing, teaching them all these different things from my limited scope, right? Because that's not my expertise. But that started it. And then there was also at the time an article about leadership and team management in some kind of sports. It was like a fitness magazine for the industry by John Maxwell. And then that's my first introduction to him. I'm just like, man, this guy's spot on. Like, this is exactly what I need to hear, because I'm trying to build a staff, and I'm trying I'm coaching teams. And I'm coaching teams where I'm 23 years old, 24 years old. And some of these kids are playing, like, there's a junior hockey team there, the Pittsburgh Forge. These kids are 19, 20 years old. They literally could be in college with me on my team, right? Like, this is crazy. And I'm trying to understand how to influence them. And so those 2 guys, and then that started me down a journey of like Napoleon Hill and Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and just all the old timers, right, if you will, and
the classics.
That everybody kind of copies now and says it's theirs, but it's not. It was they started a lot of them. I'm sure they got it from somebody else. So it's like, and apparently P.T. Barnum has some stuff. Like, all these people have all these great things, and these are the old thought leaders,
Dale
right?
Carnegie,
all these guys. And so it got me, really interested in leadership, team development, personal development. As the more I did this stuff, the more I felt like I had more to contribute and more to give to my teams. And I started trying all these different things, and like, man, this stuff's like magic. Like, my teams are now, like, we're winning, we're doing a lot better. And I coupled that with the hard work. So my teams, like the teams that I like working with, are the ones I'm going to teach how to work hard, but we're also going to have some fun when we're doing it, because winning's fun, right? And we're going to outwork teams that are way more skilled than us. And even if they aren't more skilled than us, I'm going to pretend they're more skilled than us, so that you guys have a chip on your shoulder when you come into this game, right? So I'm learning about business. I'm doing all these things, and I'm looking, and I'm like, man, I just want to understand business. And so I think Tim Hall was like, hey, you need to, have you looked at franchising? Because you can learn a system, you can learn all these things. And I'm just like, well, franchising, like, what is there? There's nothing in this industry. There was nothing in my industry. And he's like, have you looked at franchising? And he said it like 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, what do you tell me? Like, he's like, I didn't ask you if you looked at franchising in your industry. Have you looked at franchising? And so then I started looking more at some other things that were out there. And there was GNC, which is based out of Pittsburgh, right? And I'm like, man, it's saturated. It's saturated here in Pittsburgh, but
probably for the better you didn't go that
yeah,
route.
I really didn't, vitamin shopping. I didn't want to do that kind of stuff. And then I talked to my younger brother, who was at Florida State University. He was a javelin thrower at Florida State University, and he would always tell me, be like, hey, what are you up to, man? Because there's no texting. I'm calling him, right? So like, what are you doing? And he's just like, I just got back from, I got some wings at Wing Zone, dude. The place is dope. Like, it's the best place ever. And all that, he's hanging out. He's with the football team. They're all hanging out because he was going to walk on football. And I said, Wing Zone, huh? And so I called him back up. I'm like, hey, what was that place you talked about? And he's like, oh, Wing Zone, dude. He's like, the lines are like, it's incredible. Like, everybody eats these. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll put it on the list. So we put it on the list. My wife and I are making phone calls, looking at like Wing Zone and Smoothie King and all these different things. And I should have, that was the thing that kicked myself. I had an opportunity to get into Smoothie King pretty early and I didn't, but I also learned a lot about franchising, which one location doesn't do anything for you. Mm-hmm. So we go through the whole, we proceed to try to come up with a business plan. We're learning how to do a business plan and which you really don't need as you get older and have more experience, but I'm learning, right? So like we do a business plan and we're trying to go some traditional routes, with finding financing through banks and SBA and everything else, and like nothing's happening.
Yeah,
so then
very hard for anybody listening.
Very hard. So we end up finding an investor that's willing to invest in us and take a chance on us, and we had to go through like a million no's to get to that one yes, right? It's usually the way it works, and you just keep going. And so we decide that where we are, it's like Pittsburgh has a million universities. Right around University of Pittsburgh, there's like Carnegie Mellon, there's Chatham College, there's a bunch of small universities there, and there's a million hospitals. Mm-hmm. Well, who likes it? Because the Wing Zone was a takeout and delivery restaurant. There's no like dine in. So like, hey, we need to be near hospitals and universities. I'm like, check, we got it. So we proceed to meet with them, go through the whole discovery process with a franchise. So if people haven't done that, it's like you got to go down. You spend a day with them. They're basically finding if you're a good fit for their business and what they want. It's just like hiring somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Like you make sure it's a good hire. Will they work within your culture, within your system? They understand what a franchise is. You got to follow our system. You can't do your own thing. All this stuff. But so it was a good fit. We move forward with it, and we find a location. Kind of just off. It's like the edge of the ghetto at the time, and because it's like it's what you can afford, right? You get a good deal on it, and not the safest area, and it was known like if you go to the back a little bit, there's like tons of robberies and shootings and gang stuff going on, and this side is we got hospitals and we got the university. Like don't go back there, and like well that's probably where we're gonna go, right? Like don't tell me not to go somewhere because I'm gonna go there. But we built it, and we're building it out. And we hired a contractor who we end up having to fire because you just never know. Like we talked about it, different certifications. Who's holding people accountable, right? We're trying to, and I'd never hired a commercial contractor for anything, and man, did I suck at that. Like that was terrible. Like I think we overpaid for everything, and he ate up, and we had to kind of get a little more money to finish the job. We brought a guy in who did an excellent job and finished out the build out. And it was my first experience dealing with a commercial landlord, and it was literally like 1,000 square foot restaurant, 1,000 square foot, it's huge walk-in cooler. And we literally sold chicken wings was our main thing, 25 flavors of chicken wings. And so I'm learning how to be a cook. I'm learning how to do all these things. And again, I'm not a coach like anymore. Like this is me. And as I'm making this commitment, so like Tim Hall, people that were involved, there are obviously people in your life that are very encouraging. My parents are like, hey, do it. Do it. If you're going to do it, be all in and do it well. Give it everything you got. And then and that's it. I don't want to hear about it. Just go. And then but the people I'm working with, so all the other managers and everybody else at that facility, and I'm gonna talk more about that facility too, because it was a really, where I was before was a really cool experience. Got to meet a lot of cool people and really opened up some networks for me in hockey. But a lot of people there were just like, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. I can't believe you're leaving coaching. You're doing such a great job here for $35,000 a year. This is absolutely amazing. Your 401k is gonna be amazing. You're young. You're this. You're that. And I'm just like, it goes back to what I was saying, dude. You don't know me. This is not my path. This was a step. This is a step. I took it. I learned from it. But the connections I made are telling me exactly what I needed to hear. They're saying, get the hell out of here. These people are saying, go. It's time to go. Time to learn. And at the time, traditional route would have been going and get an MBA, because that was the first thing I said when Tim Hall was telling me this stuff. He's like, hey, you gotta. And I'm like, oh, great. I'll learn about business. I'll go get an MBA. And he's like, want to learn theory? You want to learn theory? Go ahead. Oh yeah. Go ahead. He's like, you're still gonna have to own a business. He goes, you're gonna make all these mistakes. He's like, why not get paid to make mistakes? Get paid to make mistakes. And I'm just like, I like that idea a lot better. And so I took the jump, and it's like, some people get caught up in too much of the noise of the haters, the people that are just like telling them not to do it, and they give too much weight to it. But it's like they aren't you, so ignore it. Put it behind you, right? That's why I tell these guys, because my kids deal with that even within sports. It's like, you start to become successful at something, right? Somebody's going to try to bring you down, and it's like, don't ever go to their level. Just stay where you are. Try to make them come up to you. They just stay where you are. And then so I will take a step back within that facility. So it was the manager. One of the managers at the facility was Dave Hansen. You ever see the movie Slapshot? It's a hockey movie. He's one of the Hansen brothers.
Okay.
So Dave Hansen. And the Hansen brothers still did events there, and they would do events internationally. So they were always there. You got to watch it, man.
It's like a comedy, right?
Yeah, but it's a classic. And Dave is an amazing guy, amazing human, like great family. Got to know the family really well. I trained the son Christian, who ended up playing at Notre Dame, played for Toronto Maple Leafs for a little bit. And that's another episode. But the Dave Hansen was there, so I got to meet and network and connect with him. And then the RGM of the facility after my first year there was Kevin Constantine, who was the head coach for the Penguins, who got fired. And so to work somewhere else, they had to buy out his contract, and he's just like, I'm going to stay in Pittsburgh. And so we brought him in, and he's not coaching. He's now the GM of our facility. And we had just started a junior hockey program, so 16 to 20-year-old kids in the North American Hockey League. And he basically was there a lot, pouring into these kids and pouring into me as a coach. Like, hey, this is I'm learning about hockey. And we had one of the world's best power skating coaches there. So I'm learning about hockey from her because I didn't play hockey, right? So my network, and then Mary Lemieux, which I'm sure you've never heard of him, right?
No.
He came out of retirement and skated in our facility. Like, it's where he came in the morning. We let him in the back door. Dale Rossetti was one of the rink managers, and he would let him in the back door. And he would come in and skate and practice. And Jay Caulfield and Rick Talk, all these other Penguin legends were kind of in there helping him get better. And so I got into this network, which is probably one of the best networks in hockey. So it's just like anything else, a small community, and that opened. So that network was open for me, and I'm like, I don't close doors. So like the doors were open, and I'm going to stay in touch with these guys even when I break off to learn about business. Then I'm going to keep these relationships when I come back. Because the goal about learning about business was to eventually come back and do my own thing, right? Because that's what Tim always like, hey, if you want to, you should do your own thing. So that in my mind, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to own my own business in this field and control my own destiny that way, right? And so I'm learning about this network, and Kevin Constantine was great in teaching me how to deal with teams, because he's obviously, he's famous for his quote. Because this is my first time working with, like, I worked in the USOC in Lake Placid, but I'm working with American teams, so there's no like language barriers. These are all just straight American teams, right? And then I get into junior hockey, and we got a couple imports. We got kids from Sweden, from Russia, from Canada. That's an import to me. But they could be from Montreal, they're speaking French, like all these French. So there's different languages, different things going on. And he always said, look, he's like, there's two languages in hockey. And he's like, there's English and there's profanity. And he's just like, so if they don't speak English, I know they know profanity. So it's like, coach them up. I'm like, all right, coach, I got you. But he also, I said the hardest thing for me was, and this sometimes this is people in business too, is maybe you're the youngest one in here, and all your coworkers are a little older than you, and you're trying to get their influence. Well, the only one that's concerned about age is usually you, right? It doesn't really mean anything to them, because it's all in how you communicate the influence, right? Are you a good leader, effective leader, a team manager? What are you? But to me at that time, I didn't understand that. So it's like, I told you, I'm 4 years older than these guys, some of them, right? And I'm trying to learn how to do it. And I remember I was just told this story the other day to somebody else. It's like, they're like, hey, coach, how did you deal with kids that were basically your age? And I said, well, it was different because, these guys in junior hockey, I'm not sure you're familiar with junior hockey at all, but it's literally run like a pro team. So you can trade guys. I could be training you today, and then they come in and like, hey, where's Alex? I'm like, oh, he's gone. They packed his bags. He got traded to Detroit. I'm like, okay. So then they got a new person here for you. So like, I'm trying to build that community, that team sense, which is a challenge. But these guys are also very independent, and they're used to fighting on the ice a lot of fighting in junior hockey. I know they're trying to get rid of some of that, but
it's just kind of crazy. Hockey is like the last sport you're just allowed to get into a fight.
Yeah.
Every other sport, like,
well, lacrosse still too. Box lacrosse,
really?
Yeah. And I
football,
saw them.
It's funny. Like, maybe it's not funny, but Football, you're not allowed to fight.
Immediately.
You're out of the game. Soccer, out of the game. Baseball, you're out of the game. Like every other sport, you're out of the game. But hockey, they're just like, well, you can fight a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, box lacrosse, I saw some of that this year. So like I trained lacrosse teams in college, and then those guys are not playing pro indoor box. And they're sending videos of like, hey coach, like, is that you knocking that guy out? But anyway, there's a lot of that in there. But so working with being able to influence people around your age was something that was a challenge for me, right? Or I thought was going to be a big challenge. I probably made a bigger deal out of it than it was. But I remember one of my first practices with this team, I have the guys in a weight room, and I told this story. There was one of the guys on the team was just kind of being blatantly disobedient, right? And I think he was a fighter. And I saw him like sizing me up the whole time. I'm like, dude, I literally would say, dude, you don't know me. Like, you don't know my background. I'm like, I will absolutely destroy you. And these are my athletes, right? But I'm like, I gotta let him know, like, no. And then he kept doing it. And then later on, he wasn't listening. He's like, I'm not going to do that. I just don't want to do it, coach. I'm like, you're going to do it. And he's just like, and he's like coming over, almost getting in my face kind of thing. And I said, well, how about this? How about, and I think he was talking a little, obviously there was a lot more exchange, and I'm just staying calm, because I'm just like, dude, like, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And he's just like, well, he's like, I wrestled in middle school. And he's like, and I'm a fighter. I'm a fighter.
Do you think that they knew that you wrestled and played football, or
they had no idea?
Yeah,
there were two kids did, and they're just like, hey, they were telling him like, hey, you don't want to do this, like, back up, whatever. And I remember him saying, like, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna take you down. I'm gonna take you down. And I said,
is he like your size? Because
he's probably like 6'1", probably about 220.
I mean, that's a big kid.
He's a thicker kid. I think he was 19. So I'm like, dude, these are two adults. Like, if we're gonna go at it, we're gonna go at it. Like, I don't care. I'm not hitting a minor. So I'm like, whatever. I'm like, hey, for $35,000, I will punch you in the face. Like, I don't care.
For anybody listening, I would not step to Jeremy here, whether or not I knew that he was a wrestler or a football player.
Yeah, but I'm just like, whatever you say. So like. And I said, all right, you said you can take me down. I said, well, we'll go. I'll go for that. Like, we'll go right now. Like, basically, I'm your Huckleberry, right? We'll go. What do you want? Like 30 seconds, a minute? Like, what do you want? And it's like, I didn't get taken down much in college. So like, let's go. Like, I'm really good at my feet. So let's go.
And you're like a year or change removed from
collegiate
wrestler.
It's like, yeah. And I'd even, I later on went to help at the Duquesne wrestling program. So like, I helped out with coaching too, but I'm like, okay, let's go. So like, they kind of made a little circle around it, and he's coming in and trying to do something. And I literally, like, I think he shot in, I put a knee in his chest and like pinned him, like put him right on the ground with a knee in his chest. Ugh. And I was just messing with him. And this was like 5 seconds into it. and then I held him there until like 30 seconds were up. And
he realized that he had made a mistake.
And I'm like, get up. I'm like, get up. I said, let's go again. And he's just like, no. And I said, look, you guys have to understand. I want you to understand something. When I'm telling you to do something, but I'm also asking you at the same time, because, but I'm not asking for permission for you to do it. You've got to do it because this is what is going to be best for your team. And I have that vision that you guys don't have, because you're looking out for yourself right now. And I said, until you can start thinking like a better team player, a better teammate, then I'm going to have to treat you like this. And then, obviously it's an incident. So I had to go up and I talked to Kevin Constantine about it. And he's like, basically, like, I would have knocked him out. Like, why'd you F around? Like, dude, just, and then
that's probably not great advice.
Yeah, like these hockey guys, like, whatever. And then he goes, I'll tell you what. He said, what I'll do is I'll give you. So he gave me like benching rights after that. Like, it was an announcement to the team. He's like, look, if you don't, like, Jeremy can bench you for any reason. So like, if you look at him funny, or if you come in, your shoes untied or anything like that, and he's like, get out of here, go. You're benched for the next game. And there were a lot of college scouts coming to our games. So he's like, if you're not playing, you're not getting scouted. You're not getting recruited. So, I don't think he wanted me beating up the whole team. So he made the benching rights thing in there. But there were always, there were other junior hockey programs. So that junior hockey program won a national championship. And then we got bought out by a team in Youngstown. So it became the Youngstown Phantoms, which is still a team today. So the Pittsburgh Forge was the original team. And then it merged, it got changed over to the Youngstown Phantoms. And there were a couple of years where obviously I had the restaurant, I wasn't training them. And then when I got my own business, they contracted me to go train them in Youngstown. And at that time, they were the first year I went up there. These guys were goons. They were guys 6'6", 6'7" on the team. I'm watching them skate. They were terrible skaters. But and they literally I don't know how many times I would be at a game and it was like a whole bench clearing, bro. It was literally like Slapshot kind of thing. Like you saw it, you have to see it now.
All right, man. It's on my watch list.
Yeah, you got to put that on there, and you'll understand some of what I'm talking about. But the they eventually evolved into a team where they're getting guys drafted and putting kids in the NHL. So Youngstown Phantoms is, the USHL is a really good program for developing kids. And I had similar rights. I had an instance there one time where a kid came in. So they could talk about like you could get traded. Well, there was a kid who was traded in. They're just like, this kid has so much skill. We brought him in. He has a broken hand, but he has an issue with working hard. And I'm like, I'm your guy. I'm your guy. And so I start, the kid shows up and he just sits down. He's got a broken hand. So he's got a cast like right here. And he's like, you know what that's from? And I'm like, I don't know what you're not sitting on it. Like, how'd that happen? And he's like, no, like I'm a fighter. I'm like, oh, that's amazing, dude. You're 6'3", 180 pounds. You're probably the toughest guy in here.
Yeah.
And, he's like, I'm a fighter. I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, okay, great. I said, well, get ready to work out. He's like, well, I got a broken hand. It's like, get ready to work out.
Got 3 other appendages, dude.
You can. There's so many things we're gonna do. You're gonna jump on a bike and this is like, no. And it's like, look, I said, well, you have a choice. Like you can do this or you can leave. And I said, and I'll just call the coaches and tell them to send you back to where you came from. And he's like, or we can fight. And I'm just like,
this hockey world is a weird one.
Well, you get a couple. And then I said, dude, you're speaking my language, man. Like, this is awesome. And like, we're getting ready to warm up. The whole team's there. And I start taking my watch off, my rings off. And I'm putting it down, like, let's go, man. Like, and then I have this like glow in my eye. I'm like, let's go. Yeah, I know you're 20 years old. Let's go, man. And I might have been 28, 29 at this time. And still training hard. I was training MMA fighters. So I'm in the cage. I'm doing all these things to these guys. And, so I'm ready. Like I'm in fighting shape. I'm ready to go. And then eventually, like, he's just like, no, you seem like you're gonna enjoy this too much. You're a little crazy. Like you're a little crazier than me. I don't want to do this. And then I literally, the next day, so he did some stuff. The next day he came in and he's still kind of lazy. And then I found out that he had a brother that was teammates in college with a kid I used to train. So I called and got a hold of his brother and I said, you need to call your brother and tell him that I'm the only guy on this whole program that is in his corner if he's willing to work. If not, he's getting cut in 2 days. And they called the kid. The kid worked really hard. And they kept him for over half the season. Then they traded him to another team, wanted him. They wanted that kid. Plus, we got a draft pick out of it. And he ended up, the kid's still playing college hockey. So he would have, I don't think that ever would happen unless I was that guy to step up and challenge him and make him do something. Mm-hmm. So he's just a kid that needed some influence in his life to do the right thing. And if that means getting punched in the face, then sometimes that's what it means.
Yeah. And Jeremy, I don't want to like slow you down or anything, but I got a hard stop. I'm like, 15, 20 minutes or so. We could always do like a part 2 on this thing. Cause I know you eventually become a stuntman.
Yeah, I haven't even touched on some stuff.
So we haven't even done any business yet. But it's kind of up to you, man. I would love to have you back on a part 2. I mean, I know your time is precious and everything. So,
Part one. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I think there's some good nuggets and some good lessons in. I mean, hopefully there was some value in what I said already to somebody. But like, I'd like to. I think there's even a lot of value when I start getting into some of the stories, of some mistakes that I made even in the restaurant business, and I have some funny stories there too. But and then kind of going through like the stuntman stuff, and even in my own businesses, some stuff that I've done there, and then how I kind of got into licensing and got into some different things, and even where I am now, and all those experiences kind of shaped to what we're launching right now. Like even with my kids having a business, the Boom Bros apparel and getting that going. And
yeah, man, you got the hat on. Looks great.
I got the hat. Thank you.
I thought about asking you for one before, because I could trade you. I got a couple.
Yeah,
of these,
I can hook you up. I might know somebody.
Cool, man. Well, let's kind of put a bow in it right now, and part 2 is we're gonna go Stuntman. We're gonna go Wings, the bad neighborhood that you were in with that wing zone, right?
Yeah. And even there's a story on making decisions on how we kind of close. And I could even tell that if or I can save it and make people come to the next episode.
Give us a little teaser, man.
Well, a little teaser is that, in franchising, you really don't make, you can have a decent cash flow in one location with a small franchise. And if you're having like a large restaurant franchise, there's some more money to be made, especially if you own the real estate, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't. And so, you either decide, basically, if you want to make money, you're going to have to have multiple franchises. And so we had the rights to basically all of Pittsburgh. And so, real quick, I didn't love it. It wasn't my passion. My wife and I kind of hated it, to be honest with you. And that's a different big part of this episode or next episode. But so we kind of prayed on it and talked about it. We had second and third locations picked out. We met with different people at this time. The facilities, the one we had is being managed. And I'm just like, man, you got to almost like give us a sign, like, what direction we're going to go. Like, I really don't want to do this. I'm not all in on this, but if this is the direction we go, then I'm going to be all in. I'm going to have 50 of these babies all over the country. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to go all in on it. And at that point, I'm chasing money, right? Which, with going back to my psychology about money, it's like, maybe that's what I have to do. Maybe I got to chase money, right?
You just took the switch and flipped it from like, I don't care to like, I care a ton.
It's all about money, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go about money. And I was willing to suck up and like, hey, I'm going to hate my life probably for a while, but I'm going to have money. I'm going to have money, right? And, but something happened, an event happened. There was a string of robberies going around, and like, I've been robbed at gunpoint. I've done all these things. There was a string of robberies, and there was a point where there was a shooting. Somebody from Domino's, a Domino's driver, got shot. It was outside our delivery zone, and then there was another one that got shot on the other side of our delivery zone. So it kept getting closer and closer. And I'm like, man, this is. I obviously care about my staff, my team. I built them, but I don't know. Like, is this, if I do that, that's a risk I'm running. And then even if I have 550 locations, and someone gets shot, that's going to fall on me. I'm going to feel like shit. Like, it's terrible. Right. And then it was like one day we were short staffed, which is very common. And, I remember I was in the restaurant and, I was in the back cooking, and my wife was up front with another person answering the phones, and all my drivers were out. And it was just I think it was a quiet, like, summer night, but in the summers, that's when a lot of gang stuff happens around Pittsburgh.
Saw out, right?
Yeah. And it was just got dark, and there was a car creeping, like, really slow up front in front of our store. And I'm just like, oh, maybe they're going to another store. They're going to pull in the gas station up there, or they're going to do a UE and kind of park in front and come in and order some chicken. So I'm not paying attention. I'm cooking, and then all of a sudden I hear this loud, like, bang, this crack, like this snap, and I'm just like, what was that? And I look out, and I can see, like, our window. We had double pane window. One was like, they were high temper, pretty much bulletproof. The second one, they were thick, and we were told to do that. So the first one is shattered. It's on the ground. And the other one working with my wife was like, grabbed her and threw her down on the ground, because she lives in an area where that happens all the time. And I'm just like, man, what just happened? And so, like, I'm down, but like, I was always caring, because like, that was something that, like, I went through some police training courses and all this stuff, and they're like, I grew up with guns, so it's like, protecting my wife and basically my home at that time. And I'm like, but then the car peels off and takes off. And I'm just like, holy crap, what was that? And so we get the police involved, and literally, so like, as you and I sit across from each other right now, where my wife was sitting, there is basically a bullet embedded and got caught by the second window that would have went straight into my wife's head.
Was there like a reason for what?
They were just doing drive-by shootings, man, like anywhere. This was part of gang rituals, initiation stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we're out. That's it, man. We're out. That was the sign I needed. A little drastic, but
that is a hell of a sign.
That's a hell of a sign. I'm like, yeah, there's no yeah, there's no
coming back.
There's
from that
no
one.
coming back. I'm like, hey, I need a sign.
Maybe we should get into sandwiches
Yeah.
instead.
I'm like, I want something subtle. I didn't need it that nailed. But hey, if you're gonna make a story, if you're gonna teach me something, that's a good way to teach me. Like at that point, it's like if we were even considering it, it's gone, and it's like that was it.
That's sweet, man. Well, Jeremy, I appreciate you giving us the first part of this, and yeah, dude, I'm really looking forward to hearing the rest of it because I know I've taken value from this, and I know there's more to be had in the future.
All right, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks,
brother.
Alex.